He was pecked by chickens until he woke up. Hansel was once the strongest man in the world. This guy reincarnated right after performing the greatest weightlifting feat of his life. He was surrounded by chickens when suddenly a system appeared in his head, telling him those chickens contained 68 kilograms of protein. That made the former bodybuilding beast Hansel punch one of the chickens and jump at the rest, because this was going to be his afternoon protein meal. After eating all the chickens, he looked at his reflection in the water and realized he was now just a weak, skinny guy. So he grabbed a massive log from the ground and started doing squats. But before that, countless people were already preparing to witness this story unfold in the world of sports. No one can believe this man is so powerful. Hansel is simply obsessed with this sport, and he's about to lift the small sum of 10 tons for the first time in history. The protagonist takes a deep breath before doing something completely absurd. After gathering all his breath, he is ready to execute an explosive force. Hansel is lifting the weight off the ground. Not even the bar is able to maintain its own integrity during this. But as he did so, at the peak of his 17 years, something went wrong. The poor guy dropped the bar and clutched his heart, which must have been severely hypertrophied due to the dirty little secret he used. His body dropped dead instantly. People are calling for a doctor, but just by looking into the protagonist's eyes, you can tell that nobody's home anymore. The protagonist opened his eyes and saw the sky. He had lost consciousness again. The doctors told him he should be very cautious. Now he possesses an epic ability. There's no limit to his muscle growth. Our boy knows that women don't like men who are too muscular, so he also received the ability of total control over his muscle contractions. He also received the hawk's eye and a passive ability to remain calm. The protagonist remembered something fundamental. He needs to eat. Hearing a sound approaching his ear, Hansel saw that he was surrounded by very ugly chickens, and these creatures are pecking at his body as if they were trying to eat him. The poor soul woke up terrified, scaring away those horrifying chickens. Hansel's most recent memory is of lifting a massive weight. His ability to remain calm activated automatically. After all, what he was seeing now was completely different from his world. Slowly, the boy is trying to understand what this is, reaching the most obvious conclusion. This must be hell. And because he had eaten a lot of chicken in his life, the chickens must be deeply resentful. That's why the chickens in this place are so gigantic, and they keep pecking at his face. But this was getting so annoying that he ended up striking the nearest chicken's head. Our boy had been angry from the start, because he knows he needs to ingest protein. After executing that blow, something happened. The hawk's eye activated, and he is now analyzing the protein content of those chickens. The system's voice is still strange, and it said that those creatures possess 68 kilos of protein. This immediately awakened the protagonist's primitive interest. He needs to consume something. Like a hideous creature from the depths, he lunged towards the first chicken, which obviously understood it was about to become prey. All that was left of that poor creature were its bones. The protagonist now burps calmly. Making a makeshift fire, he managed to ingest the protein he was craving. But there is still something in this place that leaves him thoughtful. He doesn't remember having a body as thin as the one he's in now. Even his armored chest had disappeared. He regained the mobility of a small person, able to scratch his own back. This made Hansel go to the nearest water source, as he needed to make sure of something. Reality was brutal to him. The result of his hard work had vanished, leaving nothing behind. Even though his ability to remain calm existed, realizing he was back to being just a regular beta left the protagonist deeply desperate. He wants to know what happened to the muscles he built through so much effort. Realizing reality for what it was plunged the protagonist into a deep pit of apathy. The great purpose of his life, the essence that made him the one and only Hansel in the universe, had disappeared. All that was left for the protagonist was pain. Furious, he grabbed the trunk of the nearest tree, not realizing that his fingers had managed to pierce the raw wood. The protagonist's strength is so absurd that he managed to uproot the tree from the ground. But that was just the beginning. He placed the large tree on his back. Properly prepared, the protagonist controlled his breathing. He knows exactly what to do now. It's time to start doing multiple reps of squats, because there is something that will never betray him: hard work. At least, that's what Naruto taught him. The protagonist continues to work hard in that place, and 3 months went by. During his training sessions, he manages to push his body to the limit. But after all that time, he realized something about effort. He hadn't gained a single muscle. His body mass was still the same, that of a small person. At least he has an abundance of protein in this place, thanks to those horrifying chickens. As he thinks about continuing to hunt to get the protein needed for his growth, he doesn't notice he's being watched by a cursed creature. The shadow of this malignancy covered the protagonist, who decided to look back, becoming completely terrified by what his eyes beheld. A chicken that must have spent its childhood in Chernobyl is ready to bring damnation upon him. The creature's claws are immense, and the protagonist doesn't know why he's being chased by such a beast. As he flees, he realized that the only thing he ever wanted in life was to have extremely large muscles. Now Hansel thinks he was expecting too much from life. The evil chicken almost hit him, but the protagonist managed to dodge the brutal attack. He soon realized that to lose the life he has, he only needs to be hit once. And yet there's something even more brutal than that horrifying chicken. It's the muscles on its chest. Extremely large, worthy of making any living creature envious. The protagonist, as a fine connoisseur of physiques, can't stop admiring them. He thought that to achieve that kind of development, it must have trained with cable crossovers. After observing such a large creature, the protagonist cried because he had only been training for conditioning and forgot to focus on hypertrophy. Desiring large and impressive muscles, Hansel came to the obvious conclusion that he cannot die today. During his escape, he ended up seeing chickens blocking the path. It seems they are helping the cursed rooster in its battle. Once again, the hawk's eye activated, but the protagonist doesn't need it now. What's really important is to keep running, and the boy is apologizing to all the chickens. Once again, the hawk's eye activates, but this time on the evil chicken. And the protagonist said he doesn't need it. The system said the opponent has a mere 12 tons of protein, and if he consumes the creature's breast, he will obtain a rare skill, incredible muscle recovery. This reward seems to have caught Hansel's attention. Now he is no longer the victim in this situation. The protagonist has just changed his objective. Laymen believe that exercise makes muscles grow, but in reality, this process destroys muscle fibers. Using his full physical potential, the protagonist began to leap between the trees. With proper nutrition and rest, the muscles damaged by training begin to grow. This is the beauty of recovery. Muscles become more powerful through rest, not through training. And if he can recover even faster, our boy will be able to say goodbye to this scrawny physique of his. It's time to fight that hell chicken. It almost took a piece out of the boy, but the creature's beak hit a tree instead. With such a grand reward at stake, Hansel knew he couldn't afford to die. Contracting his muscles violently, the system detected that the energy flow exceeded the user's current form. Therefore, it asked if he wanted to deactivate his contraction control. The ability that restricted him has just been turned off, and the protagonist's arm grew to an absurd size. But the hell chicken seemed to ignore this completely. Now the protagonist is ready to throw a punch with his new arm, using his fist as if it were a great iron weight. His hand is so large that it went right through the evil chicken's beak. It was at that moment that the creature realized it most likely wouldn't leave this fight alive. The force of the impact was so brutal that it caused permanent damage to the chicken's body. The system warned that his muscle durability had been completely compromised, but the muscle contraction ability was activated again, allowing the protagonist to recover. Returning to his scrawny form, Hansel said he doesn't care whether his abilities are on or off. What really matters is that creature's chicken breast. Thanking it for his next meal, the protagonist collapsed unconscious. At night, he managed to consume the creature's meat, and so far he has no idea where he is, nor does he know why his muscles changed shape. He also doesn't realize that he is being watched. Some creatures began to emerge from the shadows, and they appear to be bloodthirsty. The creatures are watching what is happening in the forest with great attention, until someone told them to stop drooling. The creature said it's been a long time since he last ate meat. It seems they are all starving, and now they watch the one who defeated the hell chicken. Most likely it's the human savoring the creature's meat. One of those ghouls decided to go over and ask, but his companions are terrified, thinking the human might be dangerous. Our protagonist quickly noticed something was going on. Those small creatures look like scared little puppies. They are ghouls from this region, and they are very hungry. Using his falcon eyes, the protagonist saw they were low on protein, and he had never heard of this type of creature in his entire life. The small creature asked if he was the one who defeated that hell chicken. The protagonist confirmed it, and began to wonder if the chicken had an owner. But as soon as they learned that Hansel defeated the creature, they began to celebrate wildly. Then the small creature started to explain the situation. When a territorial monster dies, a battle for its territory breaks out. But all Hansel could see was that these creatures were extremely thin. They looked like they could break easily. The small creature said the hell chicken was very dumb, but very territorial. That's why they wanted to ask a favor of Hansel, who is much more powerful than the hell chicken. The protagonist started to think about this request, because he hadn't been paying attention to anything at all. The small creature had already told the story 9 times, and the protagonist said that 10 repetitions is the perfect number. Every time they try something, they should try it at least 10 times. The creatures couldn't understand any of this, and one of them decided to leave, not thinking the human would help them. The protagonist apologized, saying he needed to invest his time in building muscle. The creatures began to walk away. Since they were used to being rejected, they already expected people to have their reasons. However, the protagonist realized he couldn't eat all of the creature's meat by himself. The little ones decided to accept the offer, as it had been a long time since they last ate meat, and they were very grateful for the unexpected gift. A large portion of chicken breast was offered to them. The poor thing was about to lift the entire load, and the protagonist noticed something. Hansel didn't know if he should ignore such a great injustice. If the ghoul really tried to lift the meat that way, he could end up injuring the discs in his spine. So, Hansel ordered the creature to stop. The poor soul didn't understand the reason for the command. The protagonist said it's very dangerous to lift a load with that posture, and it could be fatal. He almost put his vertebrae at risk, and that is completely unacceptable. But the poor soul had no idea what was happening. That's when the protagonist realized that none of those creatures were used to exercising. To them, the protagonist had just spoken a bunch of nonsense, like some rich kid. Now the protagonist understood why these guys were so chicken-like. It wasn't just poor nutrition, but a lack of knowledge. Then he remembered something he had learned as a child. For God's sake, look at the size of the guy's teacher. The mountain of muscle said that you only truly learn when you teach someone else. If one day your muscles stop growing, try teaching others, because that will help you. That's what the mountain of muscle left behind. Now the protagonist thinks about those words as he watches the small creatures head back home. Hansel decided to help them carry all that weight. He said that after they ate a little, they could return home. But our protagonist asked for it to be done the next day, as he needed plenty of rest for his muscles to grow properly. In the ghoul village, the people were still waiting. A very fat ghoul welcomed the protagonist. He is the ruler of that village. He wanted to know if there had been any inconvenience. To the protagonist, he must be a tribal chief. Hansel said that it wasn't problems that brought him there. This made the obese old man very happy, but the protagonist could only notice his thin limbs and high body fat percentage. He is the only obese one among his people, and must have completely undisciplined habits. The obese man said he sent more of his people to collect the rest of the meat. The protagonist knows the journey will be a bit long, and is worried about those skinny ones. Hearing this, the obese man began to smile, seeing that the protagonist cared about those useless creatures. Even though he had only just met the old man, the protagonist already disliked the bastard. The obese man said that now that the hell chicken was dead, they would have problems in the forest, because as he might have noticed, they are the weakest species in the area. The only one capable of using a skill is the obese man. Curious about this, the protagonist asked what the old man could do, but the way he asked the question fascinated the old man. Our protagonist didn't seem to know what a skill was. Even though he hears the system's voices, he's completely oblivious to it. Faced with this, the old man could barely hide his mocking laughter. He wants to talk to the skinny one responsible for bringing our protagonist to the village. Those who found the protagonist were now being taken as prisoners, and the obese man ordered them to kneel before him. The poor souls didn't know why they were being taken away like this, and the fat man said smugly that they didn't know the gravity of the sin they had committed. It was time to hand something over to the obese man, who decided to step down from his throne. It was a large club. The time had come to discipline the weak. The divine rule they follow is to obey the strongest, and he wanted to make the one who defeated the hell chicken his subordinate, but those imbeciles decided to lie to him, so now they will pay with their lives. Using his skill, the fat man managed to increase the weight of the weapon he was carrying, and he delivered a mortal blow towards his subordinates, but nothing happened. The protagonist asked what the obese man thought he was doing, because he was just exploiting the weak of his own kind. It was time for the fat man to pay for his sins, but he's surprised, thinking he failed to activate his skill or didn't use his full strength. It's not possible that a skinny human blocked that powerful attack. The obese man said the protagonist was a lucky man, and now he would learn what a skill is through suffering, because he possesses a skill that can multiply an object's weight by up to 10 times. Our protagonist was impressed by the description of this skill. The obese man began to boast, saying he had a lot of mana and could multiply the object's weight up to 9 times. The protagonist found this incredible. Full of confidence, the obese man said the club weighed 70 pounds, and if multiplied by 9, it would be devastating. Increasing the weight fourfold, he attacked the protagonist. One of the bystanders immediately fell into despair, but as soon as the weapon hit our boy, it shattered completely, as if it were made of glass. Once again, the obese man couldn't understand what happened. The protagonist praised his skill and regretted that they had become enemies. Since the obese man had such a disgusting personality, the protagonist's eyes were shining with hatred, and now he was going to perform a simple front raise, grabbing the fat man by the neck. Just because he's strong, he can't decide what happens to other people's lives. Now that he was being overpowered, the obese man wanted to solve things through dialogue. So, the protagonist asked the obese man what his numbers were on the big three. As a good sedentary person, the fat man had no idea what that could mean. The protagonist said the big three are the bench press, squat, and deadlift. Those are the big three. It has nothing to do with Jordan, LeBron, and Kobe, but none of those people seem to have any knowledge about it. Once again, the protagonist was confronted with the fact that no one there was capable of training. Outside, everyone gathered to see the fatso lift that bar off the ground. They made a bet. If the fatso was victorious, the protagonist would have to become his subordinate. Hansel was so charitable that he even told the fatso to be careful with his posture, as he could hurt his back. The obese man smiled maliciously, like he just shoplifted a candy bar, because his skill could also reduce the weight of objects. He managed to lift it off the ground because he had reduced the total weight to only 25%, successfully pulling 200 kilos from the floor. And for those of you who are terrible at basic math, he only lifted 50 kilos. Now it's the protagonist's turn. Before lifting the weight, he said that Fatso should use his glutes more. He also told everyone to watch the form he was about to demonstrate, but before pulling the weight off the floor, the protagonist did a few stretches. People think the strength for a deadlift comes from the back, when in reality, it's all in the lower body. By warming up his joints, he was preventing any potential injuries. The stance for your feet should be parallel, about shoulder width apart. Now the protagonist puffs out his chest while aligning his entire spine. This way, he's ready to pull the bar straight up, parallel to his shins, driving the force upwards. As he's about to lift, Fatso seems to be sabotaging the actual weight on the bar, increasing its weight fourfold. He just didn't count on the protagonist being absurdly strong. Our boy lifted the bar so violently that he sent it into orbit. Everyone who witnessed it was speechless, while the protagonist believes he failed to control his own strength. Now they're going to need another bar and weights. However, Fatso can't even say a word because his underwear is completely full of shit. Everyone there bowed before the protagonist, asking him to become the new leader of their tribe. Hansel has no idea how this happened. Now that Fatso had lost and knew the protagonist's strength, he decided to obey him like a neutered dog. By talking with him, Hansel learned a few more things. This really is a different world, but legends say wanderers from other worlds can return to their place of origin. Our boy, however, doesn't want to go back with this tiny body, so he decided to stay and train. The name of the place is Laisha, and the law of the strongest dictates all the rules. Fatso pledged his loyalty to the protagonist. Since he has a weird name, the protagonist decided to just call him Fatso. He immediately took Hansel to the place where he usually trains the warriors. Given the physiques of those people, our boy didn't expect such a rundown place. But seeing the training ground for himself, he realized it was even worse than he'd expected. Asking about the training they do, Fatso said they aren't used to it. Since they're all beginners, the protagonist knows the work will be very tough. Using his full authority, he ordered the zombies to form lines in front of him, 5 in total. The poor things seem a bit slow. They take a while to obey. The protagonist began a coach-like speech, saying that these creatures only eat the leftovers of the strong. Our boy knows exactly what they need. It's not information about the enemy or teamwork. They need to become strong. And for the next 3 months, Hansel will teach these people to become warriors. A very short deadline. Some of the creatures started to feel optimistic, because they're already tired of being humiliated. The protagonist liked that feeling. It's time to teach them some positions. First, the plank. The poor souls have no idea the suffering they're about to face. The protagonist is the first to demonstrate the position, and little by little, he began to be imitated by everyone. Hansel said they'll start the exercises with a simple warm-up, doing some push-ups. At first, they'll just do basic reps, 100 in total. After 3 hours, the creatures are completely exhausted. Some among them are wishing for death. All this while the protagonist is already in the thousands, doing weighted reps. While he's doing this, he gets interrupted by someone. It's Fatso, who is there to deliver a message. No zombie can withstand this training. The protagonist said that after another 100 reps, they can have a meal. But they had already done 700 reps in total, and now they have to do 100 more if they want to eat. Some of them really think they're going to die, and they miss the days when Fatso was the tribe's chief. Many want to give up on the training. They don't think they're getting any stronger, because all they feel is pain and exhaustion. Faced with these complaints, the protagonist asked everyone to gather around again. All those people are feeling very weak. One of them believes he's finally going to eat now. The protagonist said it's because of this loser mentality that they are the weakest in the forest. Hansel asked if they like being called weak by others. They live in the jungle. Only the strongest can survive with dignity. So he asked what they'll do if the lives of those they love are in danger. Will they just complain and run away like weaklings? Because if they're that kind of trash, he might as well leave now. Our protagonist doesn't want to teach people like that. But for those with the courage and determination to do 100 more push-ups, he promises to give them the strength to protect what they love. In a flashback, the narrator asks who the best trainer is. It could be the one who gets incredible muscles, or the one who pushes the body to its limit. For some, it might be this person. Through knowledge, they achieve great results. But the true best trainer isn't someone with those skills. It's someone capable of motivating the weak. And now the zombies are pushing themselves once more, even if they lack the determination for it. Shouting at the top of his lungs, the protagonist tells everyone to push as if their lives depend on it. They need to feel the weakness being expelled from their bodies so they can protect their families. Hansel told them not to give up, because they are capable. They must do this to renew their tribe and change everyone's story. Injected with motivation, one of the zombie extras started to push up with great force. All this while, the protagonist continues to motivate them all. Funny, isn't it? Everyone's training, and Fatso is just over there, holding his gut. After that brief motivation, the zombies stopped complaining. To the protagonist's surprise, he ended up developing a training skill, and his hawk eyes went to level 2. 3 months passed in the forest. The Lizardmen tribe is advancing through the darkness of the jungle. They are heading to the zombie tribe because they know they are just weak people. They survey the terrain as they prepare to attack them once again. But one of the Lizardmen said planning is useless since their victims are so weak, and they will claim that land to make their new colony. Away from the line, Fatso warns the protagonist that they're under attack. Our boy noticed that some lizards have interesting femoral biceps, so he ordered the bench press team to get ready. They need to breathe and brace their core. For God's sake, these zombies must have drunk trenbolone from a baby bottle. Hansel told them to squeeze their glutes and to watch the opponents advance. It's time to push, and several boulders started falling from the sky. The Lizardmen began to be crushed like cockroaches. They were cornered and couldn't tell what had happened. Our protagonist takes credit for that strategy. The zombies are no longer the weakest creatures in the forest. Their bodies are now aesthetic. They did what had to be done. The rocks keep falling, crushing the people's enemies. The lizard leader realized they would soon be extinct, but he soon saw an opportunity in this battle. If he attacked the zombie leader, the battle would be over. Sensing mana in Fatso's hand, he assumed he was the chief of them all. The lizard would never lose to someone as weak as Fatso. The lizard leader issued a direct challenge to the obese one, saying he shouldn't hide behind his subordinates like a coward, saying they should end this fight in a one-on-one duel. Fatso asked what our protagonist is going to do in a situation like this. Our boy is still thinking carefully. When he was a child, he had a pet iguana, a rare species called a marine crocodile, and it always liked to play. The jaws of that giant iguana were powerful, capable of exerting a pressure of just 2 tons, and even with all that power in its jaws, the marine crocodile couldn't pierce the protagonist's conditioned muscles. After being attacked once more, Hansel asked if the iguana remembered what happens to misbehaving animals. The poor thing sensed that discipline would come in a cruel way. Now the protagonist remembered, so he went down to the battlefield. The leader of the Lizardmen believes he has finally won, but our protagonist grabbed him by the armpits, slamming the Lizardmen leader to the ground. The force of the impact made the poor guy spit up a mouthful of blood, and the protagonist wasn't done yet. He asked if that lizard was really trying to intimidate him. With his underwear duly obliterated, the Lizardman leader begged to be released. Our boy saw in a wildlife documentary that he must show his superiority over animals, and he started telling the Lizardman that he's much stronger than him. This only made the poor guy even more scared, with his warrior's pride deeply wounded. But before him stood a truly terrifying creature named Hansel. Now the lizard has no courage to keep talking, as he has been completely intimidated, admitting his defeat in front of everyone. The protagonist realized that the things he learned as a child are actually useful. The zombie population celebrates their victory, and the leader of the Lizardmen asked to be truly set free. Not far from there is a village. A man is welcoming knights, saying it's great to have talented people in that small country, giving them the mission to investigate the disappearance of the Hell Chicken. This old man is the local feudal lord, and his name is Count Surdo, and those knights said they would carry out the order. The Count watches them leave the place. When they left, he asked his general if they could trust such an important task to those poorly trained men. The general told the Count not to worry. Even though those warriors are very young, they are all great prodigies. Leiper, the blonde one who looks like a chicken, usually toys with his opponents using swordplay. Hendard is very powerful, possessing absurd physical strength. He can cut his enemies even with a dull knife. When they're together, they're practically unbeatable. The Count hopes the third warrior is also equally phenomenal, but the general said he's not very good with swords and doesn't know how to describe him. For God's sake, it's the general, I just noticed now. And she said the three have been friends since childhood, and the other two prodigies like to hang out with the third guy. Now they are in the middle of the forest, looking for signs of what could have finished off the hell chicken. A damned goblin is hiding in the trees, ready to attack them with its arrows. He carefully watches the group of humans. Before he could shoot, one of them disappeared. Leiper appeared behind the creature, ready to finish it off. He forcefully ended the monster's life. But before being sent to the next world, the creature managed to fire an arrow. It almost hit the third member of that group. They are all surrounded by the monsters. The guy carrying the dull sword decided it was time to have some fun. Using his bladeless instrument, he began to slice up the enemies, turning goblins into jigsaw puzzles. The two prodigies know that the priority is to protect the goofball. They won't let anyone hurt Blog, and all the poor guy can do is stand still in the middle of that battle. At least he can thank his friends. As soon as it was all over, the two prodigies went to check on Blog's physical well-being, apologizing for leading him into such great danger. While the two argue about responsibility for Blog's safety, he himself began to feel envious of them. They all received the same training, but Blog feels completely useless and untalented. He no longer knows what he could do to get truly strong. He wishes he could get a sign from God. In the protagonist's village, the zombies are saying they can't do anything anymore. Our boy said that Citizen is about to give up. Another zombie said there is no other option, and green, scaly legs are trying to move. Since the lizard man can't do anything else, he'll have to start from the beginning. After the involuntary training session, the lizard men thanked them for everything. The protagonist said they were welcome to come back and train. Meanwhile, the zombies strike a side chest pose to say goodbye. Watching this, the lizard men fall completely silent, as they've just been mogged. All they can do now is leave in complete humiliation. Observing the built bodies of those zombies, the protagonist is getting impressed. Exercise breaks down muscle fibers, which are rebuilt through rest. However, when the central nervous system gets fatigued, it reduces the exercise's ability to damage muscle fibers, which is why rest is essential. After 9 weeks of training, the zombies were no longer seeing as many aesthetic results. Their rep count had dropped by 90%. Thinking about the best outcome, the protagonist gave them a day of rest. The next day, he was completely blown away. The zombies had grown exorbitantly. They weren't just bigger, they had also gotten taller. Through his hawk eyes, he realized they had become zombie builders with very low body fat percentages. Now that they've made this progress, the exercises can be even more intense. It's time to prepare another meal. And those little creatures want to know if they can hunt on their own. But the protagonist quickly saw through their scheme. They wanted to escape the exercises. However, the zombies made sure to explain themselves. They had never defeated that chicken with their bare hands before. And now that they have extremely conditioned chests, they want to see if they can pull something like that off. The protagonist allowed it to happen, thinking he could now exercise even more. Next to the protagonist, the big guy revealed he was worried. He doesn't know if they'll be able to win. The protagonist didn't like hearing those words one bit, and the big guy immediately started apologizing. He had assumed that if the zombies ganged up, they could defeat the protagonist, but he quickly asks for forgiveness for his slip-up. Placing his hand on the big guy's shoulder, Hansel told him not to worry about it, because he wouldn't lose to anyone in that place when it comes to deadlifts. Back in the forest, the zombie squad began the hunt. It's actually a training session. They're doing lunges while carrying a heavy load on their backs. The protagonist carefully analyzes each of their postures, until something happened. Someone injured their ankle. The poor creature falls to the ground in a lot of pain, and from the poor guy's expression, it must hurt a lot. The protagonist seems unsure of what to do. Their march now had to be halted. In that same forest, someone is using a sword. It's that useless guy who's thinking that Leiper and Hendard are obsessed with battles and didn't like letting an enemy escape. This is all because their companion isn't reliable when it comes to fighting. And what the useless guy wanted was to be strong enough not to worry his friends. Now he's practicing his sword techniques while the others are sleeping. And at that very moment, someone grabbed the boy's hands. It's the twink named Leaper, who went there to teach him how to execute the sword strike. Since this guy never opens his eyes, I'm gonna call him him China, and China didn't want to have woken up his friend. But Liper said he's just a silly boy and does silly boy things. He's definitely a twink. And they've been pretending all this time that they don't know he trains at night, so as not to hurt the silly boy's feelings, for fuck's sake. And they support the idea of the guy getting stronger. China seems to be getting embarrassed by that pinch on his cheek. The twink noticed his friend was getting more and more flushed. Not sensing the malice of the moment, China said it was because he was exercising, and the twink immediately changed the subject. That's when the third guy showed up, thinking some hot fun had started without him. With a look only a passive-aggressive person could make, Hendard watches what's happening very intently. China told him nothing happened, he was just handling his big sword when Twink showed up. So that he wouldn't give any more details of those hot moments, Liper put a finger on the boy's mouth to make him stop talking. The bottom's wrath began to rise, saying Hendard has no right to be annoyed, as he let the life of the group's only top get in danger. Full of hatred and thinking some hot fun happened without him, Hendard said they should sleep, as they need to continue their journey the next day. And it's very important for the group's top to sleep well, so his skin stays very smooth. China tries to say something, but once again he's silenced. The bottoms are about to start a confrontation, but they decided it would be better to sleep. They don't know that something else is happening in the forest. China can't understand why his two friends are fighting over his sleep schedule. Near them, a lizard man is approaching at high speed. China has already noticed there's something implied here, but he's sure his friends will just change the subject, so it's really time for them to go to sleep. But at that very moment, China noticed something with his barely open eyes. He told everyone to get ready, because the lizard men had arrived. Everyone already has their swords in hand. Furious, the bottoms are ready to unleash all their frustration. The leader of the lizard men said to ignore those people, because they are being chased. They're running from a huge number of chickens. Those absurd chickens are out of control, but even they are fleeing from something even worse. An order of the starving, who wish to consume protein at any cost. Hansel, who was engaged in the hunt, hadn't noticed yet. The forest's food chain had undergone intense transformations. Hansel and his strike squad were advancing through the forest. He asked if his comrades were capable of doing this, because looking at the chickens, they seemed to have more muscle than his zombie companions. One of them said the chickens had balloon muscles, just for show, and the protagonist was offended by this comment. One of those chickens had spotted a worm, but there were 2 trees in its path. The chicken ignored the plants and tried to get the worm anyway. As the trees blocked its path, the chicken decided to use all of its muscle contraction. It completely knocked down the trees, destroying their trunks just to get a single worm. This is the true power of chickens, whose brains are smaller than a hydrogen atom. After that display of strength, the zombies were a bit shaken, but there was one among them who was completely different. He decided to head towards the nearest trees, showing that his training was not in vain. He exerted the same force as the chicken. All his companions watched, waiting for something to happen. Since he couldn't knock down the trees, he said he needed a minute's rest, but the protagonist suggested he rest for 3. That exercise is a bit different from a bench press, so he needs to position his feet very well. After resting, the zombie placed his hands on the trees. Everyone was watching to see what he would do. Finally, the creature decided to gather all its determination, straining to knock down those trunks. He violently manifested his power. The leaves on the trees began to rustle. His result was much better than the first attempt, and the protagonist told him to get out of there. Hansel knows that compound exercises are very good, and that's exactly what they've been practicing. Now he needs to find out what happened to his team. Thinking about this, our boy started observing the chickens' behavior. The tiny-brained creatures were pushing against each other. Their wings were intertwined. The protagonist seemed to have realized the reason for the animal's strength. He had completely ignored this detail, so he apologized to his companions, and the zombie asked if his posture was wrong during the exercise. But Hansel said the problem wasn't related to that. The muscles they have now are used to the training routine. If they want to change the results, they'll need to change the training routine too. He told them to start lining up in rows of 5. Everyone was now properly assembled. The protagonist had improvised a machine made of cables to change the training routine. The zombies seemed very interested in what was about to happen. Now they were going to do a pull exercise to increase the strength of their inner chest, which would allow them to defeat the chickens easily. These words filled the zombies with enthusiasm, as they wanted to beat their enemies, and now they were beating their chests like animals. Hansel asked them to be quiet, as he was about to start the explanation. That cable exercise stimulates the inner part of the chest, increasing the quality of the muscle fibers. But it's only effective if performed with the correct posture, and it's very difficult for beginners. First, Hansel leaned forward slightly, bending his knees a little. The second detail is in the arms. You need to maintain a slight angle at the elbow so the force isn't transferred to the shoulders. Now he needed to be positioned in the center of the machine, bringing his arms together without bending his elbows. Depending on the angle of the cables, a specific portion of the chest will be stimulated. After the practical demonstration, Hansel told the zombies they could ask questions. He also made more machines on the trees in that area so the zombies could start practicing. They were all excited to start this new exercise. Our protagonist loves to see the enthusiasm of these new fitness buffs. One of the zombies was gathering all his power. The chickens began to feel the evil energy. The creatures had followed the protagonist's instructions, and now their pectoral muscles had reached a new level. The chicken's eyes could see it. Those muscles definitely represented a danger. A chicken's brain may be small, but it's not that stupid. The zombies' chests were simply absurd. This caused a different reaction in the chickens. They all began to glow intensely. That caught the protagonist's attention. A transformation was underway. All those chickens grew different feathers. Hansel immediately realized they had gotten even bigger, but the zombies weren't intimidated by this. They were sure they could overcome this problem, and the chickens were also very confident, having received a power boost. A pitched battle was about to begin between these creatures, the fury of the dumb chickens versus the muscles of the hungry zombies. The chickens' power boost was truly absurd. The transformed ones could now overpower their enemies. One of the zombies found this out in a very painful way. The protagonist watched intently as the battle unfolded. The system said that the chicken had just evolved. To prevent this, they shouldn't be overstimulated. In the zombie city, Fatty looked at the blue sky. It's amazing how he's still the only sedentary one in the whole tribe. Now that he's alone, he feels the taste of freedom. But being the big eater he is, he felt the need to chew on something. He acknowledges that the protagonist helped a lot, but they have different tastes in food. That's why today he's going to prepare grilled chicken skin. For this, he needs some interesting spices. Fatty started slicing the chicken skin so it could be cooked properly. Before frying, he needed to mix everything with the ingredients he had set aside. He was also making a kind of batter to coat the skin. He spread it all over the cuts of chicken skin that were about to be fried. With the oil at the temperature of hell, he could begin the frying process. Finally, Fatty managed to prepare the delicacy he was craving. Meanwhile, in the forest, the battle was getting fiercer and fiercer. The protagonist's subordinates were being massacred. Even after their specific training, they couldn't subdue the chickens. Now their confidence was shaken. But one of the zombies said they shouldn't give up yet. There must be a very plausible explanation for why they couldn't win. Approaching this extra, Hansel realized they truly didn't know the reason. There's a big difference in effort between them and the chickens. The zombies trained for a short time, while the chickens have been like that since birth. Realizing this harsh reality, the zombie became very sad. Getting a chest like that chickens isn't easy and demands a lot of effort, but that doesn't mean victory is impossible for them. The zombie became motivated again, realizing there was hope. Our protagonist said they must remember the origin of everything and how they got to this point. The extra knows they only got here because they are all together. They all trained hard with the protagonist. The exercises weren't easy, but they were willing to reach another level. Hansel realized that their spirits had been honed, but they needed to keep training non-stop. Just because they got a little stronger doesn't mean they've abandoned their weakness. Hansel said that in his old world, lifting half a ton was the bare minimum. It's necessary to perfect the root of strength, which is the legs, even if it's very exhausting. Now the zombies were much more motivated, exercising non-stop. This cheap motivation seemed to have accessed something hidden in the extra's heart. As he stood up, he contracted his legs with such violence that the twink from the other story arc would have loved to witness it in person. The protagonist realized the extra had finally understood everything. Using only their chest strength, they lost. But if they used their whole body's strength, things would be different. The zombie extra launched into an attack, determined to teach the chicken a lesson. The protagonist knows they had endured many things up to this day. The time had come for them to show the results of all their hard work. The zombie was channeling all his power, and the chicken didn't hold back, ready to show its fury. But once again, the zombies were completely obliterated. The poor extra couldn't understand where he had failed. They were all being thrown through the air like paper kites. It was then the protagonist remembered that the journey there had been very tiring, as he had made the zombies carry a lot of weight, and that might have interfered with the battle. With yet another victory, the chickens were behaving very cockily. One of the creatures noticed there was still one enemy standing. It's our protagonist, who continues to watch everything. This time, the chicken won't attack him. It has decided to devour that human, charging towards the protagonist with all its fury, bringing along all its feathered companions. The protagonist's expression doesn't even change, as he knows exactly what's about to happen. He just needs to use the power of one of his arms. The chickens are approaching their doom. Before the worst could happen, the leader of the chickens had a flashback, remembering when he was just a little chick. He had few feathers and wanted to learn how to knock down trees. He greatly admired the muscles of the adult chickens and the way they used their wings to strengthen themselves, developing their bodies in a bizarre way. Now he was faced with a truly dangerous enemy. After that battle, a nice chicken stew was made. The protagonist said they shouldn't be too hard on themselves, as the day's lesson was very important. They should consume that protein today, and tomorrow, they will hunt once more. It's time to absorb the gains from that hard day's work. They all celebrate in one voice, repeatedly shouting gains. The protagonist said it will be a long time before the zombies can surpass him. He asked them to pay attention to everything they were taught and to hunt very carefully from now on. Worried, the zombies asked if our protagonist wouldn't be joining them on the hunt as well. Hansel said he would join them soon, but he needs to finish his exercises, because that is much more important than the daily hunt. Now our boy is removing large boulders from the ground, as he's in pursuit of the unexplainable physique. What really worries the protagonist is that this weight isn't enough for him. It would be very interesting to have Gordon's help here, as he can increase the weight of objects. Ready for the hunt, the zombies are confident in their abilities. They can't allow the chickens to evolve again, as that could make things dangerous. That's why they need to think of ways to defeat those chickens efficiently. The protagonist has already managed to hunt 27 chickens all by himself. Eager to please their boss, they want to hunt 50 chickens that day. They will now split into 3 groups. If anything dangerous happens, they can send signals with their pectoral muscles. The first of them is already taking a hunting stance. They are all running motivated through the forest, determined to return with many chickens. That group of humans ended up finding a large skeleton in the middle of the forest. It must have belonged to a very large chicken. Observing the fracture in the creature's chest, Hendard believes it was defeated with a single high-class spell. China quickly realized that someone capable of this is on the same level as the Great Mage. This mission is getting dangerous, but his passive friend said everything will be fine, because he doesn't need to worry. Right after those encouraging words, the forest floor began to shake violently. They need to prepare now, as something dangerous could happen in the next few seconds. To the humans' surprise, it's a flock of chickens running away. Hendard, watching this, wasn't afraid. And behind those chickens is a large number of zombies. They are hunting these creatures. One of them ended up making eye contact with the humans. The twink immediately became very worried. They had never seen those creatures before, and they needed to ensure China's protection. With their muscular bodies, they are protecting the physical integrity of the group's only top. One of the zombies immediately told his companions to stop. He knows of the dangerous reputation of humans, and doesn't know if these people could be lethal. Any wrong decision there could cost his companions their lives. Knowing this, they began to communicate using their pectorals. China watches this intently, thinking it might be some kind of skill. The zombies are now trying to gather all the groups because of this unforeseen event. But the zombies' muscle mass can also be a curse. That signal didn't just reach their allies, it ended up leaving the chickens extremely stimulated. Now they are all undergoing another evolution, transforming into that intermediate chicken with hideous eyebrows. China watches all of this carefully. He knows the chicken has now become more powerful than a wyvern. Armed with this extra strength, the chickens decided to attack the zombies, and the poor souls realized that life isn't a bowl of cherries. It's a bottle of cheap, questionable booze, chugged at a lonely crossroads with a side of suspicious-looking powder. But among those zombies, there were some very brave ones. The leaders of Team 2 and Team 3 have just joined them, joining the battle as if they were characters from a shonen anime. With everyone gathered, it was time to execute the chickens. The zombies are prepared to subdue their opponents. They are going to show the secret technique learned from the protagonist. Before revealing it, the zombie was pulled into a flashback. He was lying on the bench press trying to do another rep. That's when the protagonist said he needs to learn to execute the correct form. Furthermore, it's okay to get a little help if he can't get the exercise form right, making it very clear that he needs to learn to feel his own strength safely. This is the secret technique of the gym-obsessed zombies, the assisted bench press. One zombie behind the other, like a conga line. That's how they manage to hold back the chickens. They need to contract everything they have right now. The chicken caught in the hands of these zombies is deeply regretting it, because it's feeling the power of those muscles in the worst way possible. The chickens experienced a devastating battle and a shameful defeat. They were no longer able to overcome the power of the zombies. Thus, the protagonist's subordinates realized they would be able to win. However, this is a fierce battle. One of them is completely alone, surrounded by hell chickens, and he thanked his companions for the help he had received, saying his goodbyes prematurely. The other background character became filled with rage, as he didn't want to lose an ally in that battle. 0.3 of a second is the time it takes for someone to know if they like someone or not, and it's been almost 500 seconds since those humans met these zombies. For them, that was more than enough time. They won't allow the chickens to attack those creatures, using their swords to completely eradicate the enemies. However, the humans also realized that life isn't always a cold Coke. Sometimes it's a generic off-brand soda that's flat and tasteless. Hendard immediately realized something was happening. Before all of them appeared the chicken of chickens. It has undergone another evolution, and now it is completely filled with hatred, ready to bring despair to its enemies. Even if he opened his eyes, China wouldn't know what that creature was. Before them stands a very dangerous chicken. The creature looks at the humans as if they were worms. The story takes us into a flashback to tell the tale of the first dragon. His reputation soon spread. A very greedy creature, afraid of being surpassed by future dragons. He took extreme measures. He scattered his power, and that is how the Hell Chickens came to be. And one of these Hell Chickens is ready to attack. Hendard charges toward the creature, knowing it doesn't have the power of a dragon, and claiming victory over his enemy, he hopes to receive his master's acknowledgement. The twink also decided to help him in this endeavor. Hendard is about to land the first blow with his dull sword. Meanwhile, our protagonist continues to train hard. He isn't satisfied with his muscle growth, as his body mass is still small. However, he realized that his body is not a limitation. Even with a normal size, he continues to be followed by the zombies, and it's been 3 months since they first met. In the beginning, they were just a bunch of weaklings. The protagonist had to teach them the basics of bodybuilding step by step. In the process, they thought about giving up several times, but they ended up enduring all the pain to reap the rewards of their hard work. Even though it was their bodies that developed, the protagonist doesn't know why he's feeling so good. On that particular day, he really missed his master. This made him remember another story. His master also disappeared when he was the protagonist's current age. While trying to think about this mystery, he was interrupted by a very desperate zombie. Hansel finally decided to pay attention to the creature. The zombie said they have a huge problem. The chickens have just evolved, and now they are all in danger. If things continue at this rate, all the zombies who went to hunt will die. Hansel switched into his determined mode, simply telling the zombie to point in the right direction, and he pointed towards the forest. The system issued a warning message. A monstrous muscle contraction has been detected. The protagonist is exerting an absurd amount of force, causing his muscles to swell to an unbelievable size. Our boy is now consumed by hatred. He can't believe the chickens decided to attack his children. After channeling all his power, it's time to jump. The ground beneath the protagonist's feet is being completely crushed. Thanks to the incredibly powerful stance he's taken, the power is spreading. Even the Earth's orbit has begun to shift. Finally, the protagonist pushes off with his feet, disappearing into the sky like a star, leaving just one zombie behind. The battle against that hell chicken is getting fierce. The human's swords can't pierce its body. Thinking of a strategy, the twink told his companion to distract the monster as he would deliver the fatal blow. Hendard immediately agreed. He uses his secret technique against the hell chicken, Dust Mirror. He hopes this has bought his companion some time and tells China to flee immediately, but China refuses. He won't abandon his comrades, even if he feels useless. The distraction was completely useless. The hell chicken scattered the dust while simultaneously striking the twink. The poor guy's body was thrown through the air. Even so, he managed to give a thumbs up. China can't understand why this happened. He says his companions shouldn't worry about him, but only about the battle. Hendard told Leiper that China cares a lot about them. Completely surrounded by the hell chickens, they concluded they couldn't win this fight, but China quickly realized that running was no longer an option. Defeat was certain. However, the zombies in that place are performing another secret technique. They formed a human tower, but they were utterly defeated by the hell chicken's strength. Those who managed to resist are struggling to hold the chicken back, knowing the protagonist will arrive soon. This is what they believe in with all their might. They cannot abandon this belief under any circumstances. The hell chicken's claws are approaching brutally. The creature finally broke through the zombies' formation. They were all scattered across the battlefield, completely defeated. The scene is becoming more and more desperate. They are at the mercy of those cursed chickens, who are now about to start a great carnage. It was at that exact moment that a mysterious light descended from the sky, striking the head of that damn chicken. Finally, the zombies understood what had happened. They never stopped believing in the protagonist, but as the dust settled, they realized the person who had arrived was Gordon. None of them were expecting help from someone so out of shape. While they try to figure out what Gordon is doing there, another person arrives on the battlefield, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. It's our protagonist who has just joined them as well. Apparently, he received the wrong directions from those zombies, which caused Hansel to land in the wrong place. Gordon is now completely surrounded by the chickens that are still alive. At least the strongest one has been finished off. In the midst of this situation, Gordon is exuding confidence. He asked if this is all the chickens can do. China quickly noticed that Gordon is a zombie, and his muscular friend realized that the attack was impressive. The zombie beside them said they should keep watching, because this isn't just any Gordon, that Gordon is their chief. But the chickens don't seem impressed by this. In fact, they're ready to deliver some violence, but Gordon didn't go there without a plan. These words filled the zombies with motivation, as they never doubted Gordon's intelligence, and that's exactly what he's going to do now. After getting the creature's attention, the protagonist can finish them all off. On his knees, Gordon began to beg for the protagonist's intervention. Now the zombies are worried again, because they still haven't seen the protagonist. This started to make Gordon very worried too, since the protagonist hadn't arrived yet. 6 hours ago, everything was quiet at the stash house. No stray bullets, no hassle from the cops, no junkies trying to trade stolen blenders for a fix. Gordon left his hut after a long nap, wondering why the hunting party hadn't returned yet. Gordon's tummy was rumbling furiously, eager for some food. Knowing the chickens were no longer a threat, since the worst one had already become a meal, Gordon decided to venture into the forest. 5 minutes ago, the zombies were still taking a beating. Gordon quickly realized his people were getting the worst of it. Full of fury, he demands to know who is beating his subordinates, and the protagonist's subordinates. Only one person gets to exploit these life forms, and that person is Gordon, who started to lift a large boulder. Unlike his people, he didn't participate in the training to get stronger. Even so, his social status wasn't lowered, and you must be curious about that. The reason might be simple. The trained zombies still weren't as strong as Gordon. This is actually very confusing information, because I'm sure Gordon wouldn't last 2 minutes in a fight with any other zombie. Here is the real reason he maintained his position. He needs to use his ability continuously to increase the protagonist's charge to its maximum level, which strengthened Gordon without him even realizing it. Now he is using his ability on that large rock, lifting it with all the fury in his heart, and hurling the boulder as if it were a meteor. Curiously, this even serves as a parable for how the dinosaurs went extinct, since chickens are descendants of dinosaurs. The weight of the stone was increased tenfold, and it came down on the ground as if it were a real meteor. Back in the present, Gordon realized they were all doomed, but the zombies had learned to motivate others. They saw Gordon take out one of the hell chickens, so he must be stronger than he thinks, since not everyone can defeat a chicken like that in a single blow. Hearing the voice of his own schizophrenia, Gordon started to believe he had an innate talent, and must be much better than the others. With his confidence boosted to the max, he believed he would defeat all the chickens, but all he managed to do was get hit brutally and violently. Sent flying through the sky like a shooting star, the zombies left on the battlefield are now without hope. China decided to look at his companions, apologizing for never understanding their jokes. Poor guy, he's really dense, and his friends said they never made jokes. They were always being serious. Even so, China believes they're just kidding, and he started to think about what he would do in his afterlife. Accepting that this is his last living moment, he's happy that he's not alone, but beside his comrades. The zombies are also ready to use all their muscles, and now they are ready to deliver a fierce battle, grateful to the protagonist for teaching them how to get big. They advance like a great army against the hell chickens, just like the team of humans who are also prepared for battle. The problem is that those chickens seem extremely cruel, even if they are very stupid. In this final moment of courage, the zombies want to make the protagonist proud. The two armies are finally about to clash. In the middle of the forest, the protagonist found Gordon, who had been defeated. Almost out of strength, Gordon said something to Hansel about his subordinates. They need to be saved. There is no other hope. Those seemed to be Gordon's last words, as he now lost all strength. That triggered an uncontrollable emotion in the protagonist. His passive ability to remain calm is unable to control this impulse. Meanwhile, the zombie tribe is about to sacrifice themselves in this battle. They try to attack the chickens, but the creatures are extremely fast. One of the zombies became worried about this, but when he looked back, he noticed the chickens were all running together. A fierce and demonic presence had emerged in the forest. It's our protagonist, whose pectoral muscles are resonating like the trumpets of the apocalypse. That had drawn the attention of all the chickens, which made the job much easier for our boy. With their tiny brains, they watched their next victim intently. Consumed by an abyssal coldness, Hansel said he had never been calmer in his entire life. Due to his emotions, the passive ability to remain calm was cancelled for one day. At least the zombies weren't there to find out what happened. They could feel the vibrations in their muscles. It could only have been caused by the protagonist. China wants to know who they're talking about, not realizing the twink on his back is facing the greatest battle of his life. The zombie said he is their master, the one who taught them all how to get big and strong, but any explanation is useless. It would be better for a human to see it for themselves. But another zombie there said his friend is an idiot and should try harder to explain things. So, he would start from the beginning. Hansel is the new mayor of the hood and lord of all those zombies, but China still doesn't understand a thing. The chickens are full of attitude, ready to annihilate our boy. One of them tries to strike him with all its might, but all our protagonist had to do was catch the blow with his hand, while simultaneously delivering a destructive punch to the chicken's belly. Even though it can't fly, it just flew like a hawk. The other chickens didn't like seeing that at all, so they started making evasive moves. In a coordinated manner, it looks like they're about to launch a deadly attack. The creatures are now grabbing each other by the claws, performing an embarrassingly awkward dance, trying to crush our boy. The chicken soon realized that wasn't enough. The protagonist, using just a small portion of his power, managed to block the blow. That's when the chickens realized that if they wore underwear, it would be feeling very heavy right about now. But not all of them are cowards. Some want to dish out some violence. All the chickens started stomping on our protagonist, hoping to make sure he never gets up again. But that's not what happened. Hansel managed to grab the legs of one of them and used it as a boost to launch himself towards the chicken's head. They couldn't even see his movements. Our boy managed to hit the poor creature with his knee, making it feel the same pain a man feels when he has the flu. After defeating another enemy, the remaining chickens grew even more terrified. The protagonist learned from his mentor that he can develop his muscles according to vibrations. That's why he lured them all to this place. He can make the chickens stronger through his own muscle vibrations, but they can't do the same, because they are not as powerful as the true king of this jungle. Using techniques forbidden in all gyms, the protagonist started doing CrossFit. The chickens saw this as a weakness and decided to attack, but the only thing they got for their petulant gesture was more aggression, because the protagonist possesses a truly absurd amount of strength. This time, he's showing them his muscles' ability to swell up, throwing the ground and everything on it into the air. The chickens can do nothing to stop it from happening. This battle is getting confusing even for these birds, who can't think straight, because now the protagonist is doing a set of squats. With his muscles properly warmed up, he started hitting the chickens with a piece of wood, which was actually a tree trunk, performing several pirouettes in the sky, as if he were a gymnast. Now it's time to put his triceps to work. The protagonist hurled the trunk towards one of the birds, forcibly removing the soul from its body. Finally, the zombies and humans managed to reach the battlefield. Still very confused, China wanted to know if that was the zombies' mayor. It's simply absurd that one person possesses such immense power. The hell chickens are now completely terrified. Meanwhile, the protagonist is moving at nearly the speed of light. To get to that place, he had to use a lot of his leg strength. He can't waste any more energy, so he started to remember the training he did with Fatso. It was too exhausting for the big guy, who got so tired he wished for death itself. But the protagonist needs to honor the memory of Fatso, who helped him train. Hansel wants to end it all with the next attack. Channeling all his violence, he charged at the birds. It's time to show them the true power of the bench press, executing his 1-rep max. The system warned that his lower body muscles were overloaded with the additional weight of his torso, and before our protagonist, there is a sea of countless hell chickens. But to his surprise, several hands began to help him in this endeavor. It's the zombies, ready to help their mayor in this fight. It's time for one more rep, or they'll go to failure. With his motivation renewed, the protagonist realized he could go much further with his friend's help, unleashing immeasurable destruction upon those poor chickens, who were completely annihilated. Finally, Hansel managed to honor Fatso's memory, and he also got all his exercises in for the day. Lying on the ground, exhausted, the protagonist realized he was going to miss Fatso. The zombies recalled the time before the protagonist. Fatso used to be very abusive to them all, but he became a good person after Hansel arrived. Now the protagonist needs another assistant. He started observing his subordinates. It seems this news wasn't well received, as all of them are looking away. Until, to everyone's surprise, Fatso stood up, thanking the protagonist for his hard work. Our boy was silent, as were all the zombies in that place. Fatso doesn't know why everyone is so worried. He had just taken a nap because he was exhausted from the battle. Everyone is now running towards Fatso to hug him, but the poor soul has no idea what he did to deserve all this attention. Now that everyone is piling on top of him, Fatso realized he might actually die this way. Greatly relieved and joyful, the protagonist welcomed Fatso, who had risen from the dead. Elsewhere, in a village near the forest, news of what happened spread to the Count. He learned about the one responsible for finishing off the hell chickens. This was the report from his soldiers, specifically the 3 who were sent into the forest. The Count knows the zombies pose no danger. The real problem is the human living among them. They'll never know when the next enemies will show their wicked claws. Therefore, the Count needs to think very calmly about his next steps. As he was thinking, the general asked where China was. With tears in their eyes, the Bottoms are delivering the worst news of their lives. While they were still in the forest, someone started groping China's body. Being an excellent admirer of physiques, our protagonist began to analyze those absurd proportions. Obviously, the bear and the twink didn't like the excessive physical contact at all and started to get aggressive. But our protagonist is truly impressed by his good posture. The bear didn't like seeing his friend treated like an object. The protagonist asked if China would like to get stronger, completely ignoring the swords coming his way. Before they could touch his body, The protagonist caught them using only his fingers. Then he asked the question again, wanting to know China's answer, because if he desires to become stronger, he should stay with him to start training and exercising. This invitation seemed very confusing to China. Remembering what happened, the bottoms get even more emotional. They had no choice but to leave China behind, and now they are begging the general to save China's life from those cruel monsters. These exercises could be black magic. The Count recognizes it might be dangerous, but they can't take that risk now. Not to mention the general wouldn't do something as reckless as they had requested. Even so, the bottoms want to teach those people a lesson. Showing a piece of her absolute power, the general guaranteed they would teach them a lesson, and ordered the bottoms to prepare for battle. The Count said they were being too emotional, but the general was completely consumed by her battle spirit. It was then that the old man realized he could no longer do anything. The general didn't like that they touched her student. It's time to bring pain and suffering to the people of the forest. She left the room, swinging her general's cape. It's time for her and the bottoms to carry out a rescue mission deep into that forest. Back in the hood, the protagonist is introducing the newcomer to the others. They'll start with a simple exercise, squats. China has no idea what a squat is, but the protagonist said he would teach him. This exercise is perfect for stabilizing weight, and it's also very useful for building muscle. Our boy noticed that China was already very tired. He squatted all the way down. It seems China really is mentally challenged. Our boy explained that he just dropped down. That's not the concept of a squat. He needs to focus more on his thighs and hip flexion. The first step is to place your feet shoulder width apart. The knees and toes should point in the same direction, and the hips should start to lower as if you're about to sit down. The force should be focused only on the hips and thighs. That's a true squat exercise. Hansel commented that the execution was very good for a first-timer, almost as if he'd been taught before. China said he had only taken fencing lessons. Ignoring that, Hansel told China to do another rep. He also told him not to lose his abdominal contraction. If he could raise his arms, our personal trainer would add some weight. Placing the bar on China's back, the boy felt it was quite heavy, but our protagonist hadn't let go of the bar completely yet. When he let gravity do its magic, China felt the true weight of it. In a firm voice, the protagonist told his new student not to lose control of his posture, because he needed to keep doing those squats. Filled with hatred and determination, China managed to lift the bar with the extra weight. That was enough. The protagonist removed the bar, while China was applauded by the zombies. Even though he was a novice, the protagonist was impressed by China's potential, as he managed to maintain his posture. Now he was sure his eyes hadn't deceived him. This is what powerlifting truly means. Hansel remembered that China only decided to follow him because he wanted to get stronger. China's motivation is as strong as his friends who use swords to fight, and to do other things as well. The protagonist said that maybe he wouldn't get as strong as his friends. That left China a little disappointed. He believes that an ordinary person like him can never match the potential of a genius, no matter how hard he tries. Still, he was very grateful for the lessons he was receiving, but the protagonist didn't understand what that nonsense meant. He said China would get strong in other ways, strong enough to protect his friends' lives, because China possesses a very rare talent. This compliment made the young man's eyes widen for the second time in the story, and from the way he just bit his lip, I think he really liked hearing that. Visibly emotional, he said this was the first time he had been acknowledged by anyone, and the protagonist told him to stop crying. The system notified our boy that his hawk eyes had reached level 3. Our protagonist is carrying some held chicken chicks in his arms. He did this because they can't keep hunting like this. It could wipe out the chicken population, so they must prevent the chickens from going extinct. Gordo knows those chicks will grow very fast, so raising them won't be a problem. Not to mention, few creatures can defeat those roided out chickens. Even the chicks are born full of rage. The problem is that once they're adults, no one will be able to defeat them, and the protagonist asked if Gordo really couldn't, but he chose to remain silent. With skepticism in his eyes, the protagonist asked again if Gordo really couldn't do it. Sweating and worried, Gordo said there might be a chance of victory. Hansel really liked those words, because Gordo shouldn't underestimate his own people, much less the strength they were cultivating. Back to the physical exercises, the zombies are doing more squats. Everyone is following the protagonist's count. Among them, someone is rubbing a very suspicious powder on their hands. It could be party dust, or it could be magnesium powder. The user's reaction will reveal the truth. China is doing squats while Gordon uses his ability to increase the weight. He wants to know if China is ready for the suffering. Full of determination, China announced he was born ready for it. Then Gordon began to use his ability, increasing the weight twofold. This made China's eyes widen once again. Gordo needs to stay focused to maintain the pressure of his ability. It was so intense for China that a vein in his face burst. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues to exercise calmly, motivating the zombies who are still training. They are all doing brutal and exhausting reps. It was then that someone carrying a sword appeared. Without asking any questions, this mysterious being simply attacked the hideout. In the blink of an eye, a huge explosion rocked the place. The zombies who were training were caught in the destruction. China is terrified, and Gordo has no idea what just happened, until his eyes fell upon the intruder who had appeared. It was the general who had arrived. She wants to know who was responsible for kidnapping her student. Gordo said there was a misunderstanding. He's no longer the mayor of this hideout, and he doesn't know this woman. Ready to end Gordo's life, the general said he should have just answered with a yes or no. She delivered a completely devastating blow, one that would certainly finish anyone off. But she soon realized things didn't go as she planned. Our protagonist stopped the blade with his bare arm, saying that all they do in this hideout is exercise. The general seemed to like this man's body, which was hard enough to stop a sword. Hansel noticed the sword had made a superficial cut on his skin. This woman is very dangerous. The general called out to her minions, wanting to know if she was facing the one responsible for the kidnapping. From a distance, they confirmed the information. They also spoke to China, telling him they were there to rescue him. With tears in their eyes, the bear and the twink couldn't hide how much they missed him. The general apologized for interrupting their training, but said that it's very wrong to steal someone else's student. Our protagonist started talking to China. He hadn't imagined the boy already had another trainer. If he had known, things might have been different. Now China is stammering to tell the truth. He started to tell the story from the beginning, but he was quickly interrupted by our protagonist, who said that bodybuilding is much better than playing with swords. China can be honest about it. He no longer needs to hide what he feels. The boy remained quite silent, and apologizing to the general, he admitted that he really likes bodybuilding, much more than playing with swords, apologizing for making her come all this way just to find him, because now he has found a new master for his path. The general realized there was nothing she could do about it. She simply began to draw her sword once more, because now she would have to take her student back by force. Using her secret techniques, she tried to attack the protagonist again, but our boy had gone through long recovery sessions. His muscles were completely fired up. Striking a side chest pose, he managed to defend against the sword's attack. The general said her pride was wounded. All she managed to do was leave a small scratch on the boy's skin. She asked if it was China's desire to build a body like that, and the young man said yes. Knowing this, she suggested a competition. Both masters would duel, and the winner would take the student. This would also determine which martial art is superior. The protagonist said that bodybuilding has nothing to do with martial arts. It's just a technique to build one's body. But the general knows he was responsible for annihilating the hell chicken. The protagonist said he only did it to get protein to survive. This made the general realize that exercise is useless in combat. This comment deeply offended the protagonist's pride. She realized her comment had been effective and asked what the point of having a muscular body was if he couldn't fight. It's the same as nothing, and his body is the same as trash. But this comment stirred something mysterious in the protagonist's heart. Driven by the will to prove his point, he would now show her the true potential of real exercise. All the zombies gathered to watch. They wanted to know who was stronger. Given the size difference, the answer was a bit obvious. The general is practically a dwarf, but China said they shouldn't judge a person by their height. That woman is one of the 10 most powerful people on the entire continent. Our boy is using his hawk eyes, realizing his enemy is a sword master. He also managed to identify her weight and body fat percentage. It's just bizarre that she could injure his body despite being so small. That should be completely impossible. Curious, the general wants to know what the protagonist is teaching those people. She's confident in her own swordsmanship. She launches several strikes at our boy. He managed to defend against all of them, but he realized the impact is truly absurd. The general cuts her enemies using ki energy, and now she's going to teach the protagonist a few things through pain and suffering. Our boy tries to defend against all those slashes. The general keeps calling our guy an alien, even though he looks human, and asks if he knows why she does that. Our protagonist completely ignores her. Dodging his blow, she revealed that the color of the mana surrounding the protagonist's body is red. After that, she did acrobatics in mid-air. Ready to attack him, she explains that the closer one is to demonic descent, the redder their mana color is. And based on the way he fights, there's no technique that can change a person's body shape. The protagonist dodged that brutal blow using the strength of his legs, also performing some flips to get away. The protagonist said that the greater the effort in exercise, the more the body changes. These people lack even the most basic common sense. But the general believes this is only possible for aliens like him. Humans can only use mana the way she does. And now she will use a completely brutal combination of swords against the protagonist. Several energy blades were aimed at his body. This is how the humans of this land compensate for their lack of strength. A great clash of energies had occurred. The protagonist seems to have felt those blows. No matter how hard he tries, there's no way he can defeat a martial artist like her with his current techniques. Fallen on the ground, The protagonist asked if her opponents are all stagnant, but she didn't understand. Hansel wants to know what happened to her adversaries the next day, how much stronger they became right after. The general said that's not a relevant topic. There's no way her enemies could survive after fighting her. Finally, our protagonist managed to gather all his power, showing her a huge double bicep flex. As if he were a decorated Mr. Olympia, he simply defended against all those blows with his body's posture. The people who train with him at the gym can defeat their enemies the very next day, after a day of rest. Now he will show the general his 10-rep technique, making his body extremely brutal. After absurdly increasing his size, it's time for the protagonist to teach the general something. China is watching the combat intently, and one of his old friends went over to talk to him. It's those two bottoms, who seem to have a lot to say to him. The twink started to apologize, thinking it would be hard to contact him again, so he decided to talk to the general. And now he imagines China will hate them even more because they acted like two idiots. But our mentally challenged boy can't understand why he would hate his friends. They believe China only abandoned them because he was under too much pressure. So China told them he decided to stay in that place because he wanted to learn from the protagonist. When it's all over, he'll return to the city. These words filled the bottoms' hearts with joy, and they want to know what martial art he's going to learn in this desolate place. Not even China can explain to them what he's been learning. So he decided to ask the big guy for help, but the big guy can't find the right words either. Trying to find an explanation, China asked if his friends remember the first lessons they had with the general. The twink said they were supposed to focus on their lower body. So China began to explain the exercise they're going to do now. They're going to work their thighs with something called a squat. Hansel said it's crucial to learn the correct posture first to avoid injuries. The big guy started to worry about the weight China was putting on the bar. It could be dangerous for beginners, but China assured them he would help his friends. While they train happily, the protagonist is engaged in a fierce battle against the general. Unexpectedly, the woman manages to resist our boy's strength, but that only happened because he started going easy on her, and she noticed, getting irritated. But our boy said he's only doing it to gather his strength. In the middle of the battle, she started hearing strange groans. They belonged to her other students. Immediately, the general decided to see what was happening. She was shocked to see those shirtless men gathered and exercising. Visibly disturbed, and with her mind full of impure thoughts, she wants to know what this forbidden training is. Our protagonist said they're repetitive squats, part of the basics. Full of mysterious interests, the general said she'll add these exercises to her training program. Returning to his normal size, the protagonist asked if she was sure about that. He wants to know what she saw in their exercise that made her change her mind. The general, full of conviction, said she could observe the joy and satisfaction of those sweaty men. Finally, she and the protagonist reached an agreement, united by physical exercise. Examining the general more closely, our dear protagonist found something. He noticed that her forearm muscles are highly conditioned, and he grew curious about how she must have achieved that. The protagonist can hardly contain his excitement, considering the possibility of learning something new. Actually, it's nothing special, as she has to swing her sword every day. Faced with the protagonist's curiosity, she wants to ask the questions now. The general wants to know if it's okay for Hansel to teach them his training method, which seems very advanced. But our boy assured her that the more people training, the better the result, so it's all right. Still, the general didn't understand his words, failing to grasp the advantage in his argument. The protagonist explained that this way, there would be gyms everywhere. Not to mention, by studying different methods, their collective knowledge would be enriched. And one of his wishes is for the culture of health to spread throughout the continent. After hearing all that optimistic planning, the general said Hansel is a much funnier person than she imagined. Because of that, she promised to do him a favor when needed, a promise the protagonist greatly appreciated. During the first night of their journey, it was time for their meal around a campfire. China decided to approach our boy, as he has a few things to say. He tells the protagonist that he probably doesn't know this, but the country where China grew up is extremely discriminatory. It starts with different kinds of humans and extends to their magical abilities. Anything is a reason for discrimination. Now that they're heading towards civilization, he's afraid the protagonist and his jacked-up zombies might get hurt. Hansel acknowledges that this is indeed a challenging problem. At this, China felt a certain relief, suggesting they consider the visit another time so they could plan better. He was immediately ignored as the protagonist went over to the horse feed. Since he didn't like the dinner offered there, the protagonist went to find the nutrients he needed. His lips began to tighten. He really liked the crunchy texture. Without a doubt, this is the main ingredient of oats, which he can make porridge with. Our boy looks at the grain with great love. Only the horses are eating clean carbs like this. That's a very serious problem. Some soldiers are thinking our protagonist is a savage for eating animal food. The others said there's no salvation for monsters, who will always have inferior habits. Popping into the discussion out of nowhere, the big guy said that if a monster heard that, it would be saddened. In fact, the big guy had tasted the meal offered to those men, which surprised him greatly. He showed a small bowl to the onlookers. Enchanted by the food inside, they began to doubt if it was really the feed. Both decided to taste what the big guy had offered. In a few seconds, they were overcome with absurd thoughts, all because of the flavor. The man with the mustache found the sweet and sour taste perfect, as he could feel a hint of pepper. His long-haired friend said a miracle had exploded in his mouth. The big guy said he'll reveal the recipe to them when they reach their destination, if they stop bothering the monsters. Both soldiers agreed to these terms. Approaching the general, our protagonist asked if she was Rihanna. The woman wanted to know why he was there since they wouldn't be traveling again until the next day, but our boy was there to collect on the favor she had promised, something the general remembered very well. Showing her a handful of horse feed, Hansel asked if he could be supplied with it. Rihanna knew it was used as feed and had heard from her students that our protagonist was raising hell chickens. Surely he wanted it to feed them, but our boy insisted that he and the zombies would be eating it. This was so bizarre that the general pitied these people who planned to eat animal feed. One of the zombies agreed with her, but for different reasons. He realized the woman held a high rank among humans and should be listened to. Since they weren't used to that food, it would be better to refuse. But our boy didn't like this comment from his allies. Rihanna said they hadn't said anything wrong, and if he wanted better food or a different item, he could ask without hesitation. She suggested they could upgrade the zombies' tents to wooden houses and even provide them with armor. One of the zombies offered to trade the chicken meat for it, but the protagonist interrupted again, saying that wasn't what this was about. Eating only protein is bad for the liver because of how it's metabolized. When the right amount of carbohydrates is consumed, it's possible to form glycogen, which is essential for muscle fiber production. And those oats are a slow-digesting carbohydrate. Besides being low in calories and rich in nutrients, it was called the king of grains on the protagonist's home planet. That's why there was no better reward than oats. Even after hearing all this, Rihanna didn't seem convinced. She still found it foolish. The zombies were also apprehensive, wondering what might happen, but they soon filled with joy, eager to try this miraculous grain that helps with muscle growth and glycogen production. Some onlookers watching their enthusiasm were surprised by all this, thinking the secret to the monster's strength was in the oats. Unwilling to lose this competition, the soldiers declared they would eat it too. The two bottoms also became curious, as their former top was calmly eating the horse feed. The zombies were devouring the grains, followed by the soldiers. The only ones not eating now were the horses, as even the general's students decided to try it. Everyone immediately spat out what they had eaten, as the taste was awful. This raised a lot of questions among everyone. The twink told China to spit out the grains as they were definitely not good, but the boy decided to give it another chance, continuing to chew patiently. He said they had a slightly tough texture, but it became very tasty in the end. The protagonist realized that China also had a talent for eating. He would soon become very strong. Behind him, Rihanna remained very confused. She didn't understand what the protagonist had said, but he seemed satisfied with his request. She assured him she would produce the necessary amount to satisfy him. Hearing this, Hansel couldn't hide his joy, saying the general was the best. But judging by the state of those who had tried the raw oats, it was still a risky move. The next day, the general's caravan reached the castle and was received by the soldiers. As she cleared the way, our protagonist also drew closer. Finally, he entered the walls. China told him to remember what he had heard about humans and their prejudice. Soon, they were being watched. All those people seemed to be constantly judging them, because this was a highly discriminatory country. Gradually, the zombies began to realize what was happening. Everyone was staring at them as they advanced into the city. Then our protagonist decided to touch one of them on the shoulder, telling them they should keep their posture. The zombie glanced discreetly to the side. Our protagonist said they were being watched for one simple reason. They had really cool bodies. The zombies didn't seem to believe it, still looking a bit skeptical. But China was sure that wasn't the real reason. That's when one of the zombies started to take a deep breath. Unanimously, they all began to strike poses to show off the muscles they had built. The populace, which had been watching curiously, now looked on with great embarrassment. If they were thinking other things, they lost those thoughts, contemplating the utter strangeness of it all. As they posed intensely, some people in the crowd began to lean towards liking these monsters. Inside the castle, the count asked if the protagonist was going to teach that woman how to train, and if that would be the payment for the herd. Our boy said he had asked for seeds. That's what they would be consuming. Because of this answer, the count began to think the protagonist was uneducated. He said he had granted a special request from the general to bring the monsters to the castle. If it weren't for that, he would never have allowed the protagonist to enter the place under any circumstances. Bowing before him, the general thanked the Lord for his kindness, but she was interrupted by a shout from the count, who who was about to make his point. Ordering our protagonist not to cause trouble, he was to teach the soldiers how to exercise and then leave immediately. Our boy agreed, adding that if the Count wanted to learn how to train too, he could be his personal trainer. This proposal was apparently well received by the old man, but as they left his room, he started calling the protagonist reckless. Right after that, he sat on his throne. Given the general's popularity, he considered public opinion, which could affect him. With a malicious smile on his face, he saw a great opportunity in all this. He immediately ordered his servants to summon the Tutula mercenaries. He believed the general's request would reveal the creature's true nature, making her regret what she had done. On the soldiers' training ground, several men were exercising. Then someone told them to stop everything, because that day they would have a special training session. The person in charge would be our protagonist, the Lord of the Zombies, who had been brought there by the general herself. The soldiers were confused. They didn't want to learn from a monster and didn't know how he had become an instructor. Maintaining his speech, their trainer said that orders must be followed, so they should think carefully about it. Hansel began to introduce himself to them, stating he was a special trainer who would teach them how to work out that day. And since he also didn't like how everyone was looking at him, he told the soldiers to get down. The men started looking at China, who became embarrassed. Showing them what to do, our protagonist got into a push-up position, telling the soldiers to do the same, as they were being disobedient. Behind the protagonist, all the zombies with him did the same, and the protagonist asked once more if the soldiers weren't going to get down. China was the first to set an example, doing as Hansel had ordered. A soldier among the onlookers said this was a funny sight. He wanted to know if his comrades would really follow a monster's order. Their instructor told the cadet not to offend Hansel, who was a special trainer, as it would be an offense to the general herself. Even after hearing this, the cadet asked if his instructor really agreed with this, and if the monster's order could be equated to the general's order. This comment irritated the protagonist. The instructor seemed to agree with him, as he remained completely silent. The cadet told everyone to stand up, as they must maintain their dignity as humans by rejecting the monster's orders. Our protagonist couldn't understand the problem, while the instructor affirmed that military orders are absolute, but the cadet said that as a human, he would not obey. Furthermore, regarding the training the protagonist mentioned, there was no use in training anything other than the sword. Lastly, pointing his sword at the protagonist, he said he didn't want to learn techniques from uncivilized monsters. Before the protagonist could do anything, the big guy stepped in his way, claiming he could resolve the situation. He said that China could teach these people as the protagonist's representative, asking if that would be a problem for the soldiers. As for the second problem, he couldn't say if swordsmanship was more useful than these exercises, but a fight could settle that doubt. Lastly, as to whether they were civilized or not, it would be better if they competed to decide who was best. The big guy asked his troop if they were ready for this, looking at the zombies. All of them were showing off their muscular bodies, affirming they were ready. Witnessing all that confidence, the protagonist felt very fulfilled. The zombies were learning something. The cadet agreed to the proposal and asked his instructor if it was allowed. With a simple nod, the instructor gave his permission. Since the cadet would be representing the human side, he wanted to know who would represent the monsters. From among the creatures, a large, muscular zombie, who was the same size and appearance as all the others, decided to step forward. The cadet smirked. He wasn't just any cadet, and that monster was doomed. He would show them the fury of the Tutula mercenaries who were hired directly by the lord of these lands. The mercenary charged forward. As he got closer to his enemy, he declared that he was going to die, but the zombie wasn't scared. He would just use a one-armed lift. He struck the mercenary's face with brutal force. 11 out of 10 people would have died from that impact. The poor guy was sent flying. Our protagonist went to help him, thinking he might be dead, but one of the zombies said he saw him twitch, so he might be alive, or not. The mercenary was still unconscious, and our protagonist was scolding his zombie for going too hard, but the scolding was pointless, as the zombie hadn't done it out of malice. However, they had won the challenge. It was time for the soldiers to start obeying him. It was then that the mercenary used something, his combat skill. His entire body was engulfed in a mysterious energy. It seemed he had just been renewed for another round of beatings. In the blink of an eye, his body vanished from where it stood. The mercenary was ready to attack the zombie from behind. He refused to take orders from a monster in this place. The poor creature looked back, unaware of the approaching danger. However, the big guy was already prepared and immediately used his ability to increase the weight of things, maxing it out. Thanks to the extra weight on his own body, the mercenary couldn't complete his attack. He had been stopped. The protagonist didn't like that one bit and was now heading towards this poor soul, and he was ready and prepared to discipline him through pain. All Hansel had to do was gently touch the degenerate's body. The force was enough to send him flying, completely shattering the wall behind him. Now the mercenary was embedded in the wall, like a piece of modern art from some random museum. The pain he felt was immense. He couldn't move or even speak. After all these interesting events, the general decided to check on the training grounds. She was anxious to see what the protagonist had done with her troops using this training method, but all she saw was a large crowd of soldiers, wondering whether he had used magic or not. These men were talking about the monsters. Surely they used magic, which is why they couldn't be trusted. Confused by what she was seeing, the general told the instructor to explain the situation, as she had no idea what was happening. On one side stood the protagonist, and on the other, the instructor. He said there had been a battle because some of the men refused to obey the general's direct orders. The soldiers ended up losing these battles, but they were insisting that the monsters had used magic. Approaching our protagonist, the general asked if he had really used magic during the fight. Hansel stated that they would never do such a thing. That wasn't enough for her to believe him, and she now turned her attention to the instructor. Quite nervous, he stated that he also didn't think magic was used. At that moment, one of his men asked if he was going to believe the monsters. Actually, the one who asked was the Count. He had come because he'd heard an unbelievable rumor, and now he was ordering them to tell him everything. He also wanted to know whose side the general was on, the humans or those disgusting creatures. Visibly distressed, the general said she was on her people's side. This enraged the Count. He wanted to know who she was listening to now. Our protagonist thought the Count had come to exercise too, so he asked him to get off his horse first, but the big guy sensed the tension and discreetly told him that wasn't why the Count was visiting. Looking at the general, the Count asked if she knew how highly he thought of her. The woman said yes. Continuing his speech, the Count claimed that the guests she brought were causing a huge problem among the people. One of his students was gravely injured, and this is a very serious problem. That's why he could no longer ignore the situation, which had brought him to the training grounds. Because of what happened, he was exiling the general for the next 2 years. Receiving this punishment for no reason, the general began to burn with rage. The malicious energy she exuded was so intense that even the Count got scared, immediately ruining the underwear he was wearing. The soldiers didn't like this punishment either. They asked him to reconsider and to let them finish off the monsters themselves. But the Count was now concentrating on getting back to normal, as he had crapped his pants a little. The general apologized to the protagonist, as she was unable to care for his people after bringing them to this land. Hansel acknowledged that things don't always go as planned and told her not to worry about what happened. The general asked if they really couldn't leave the monsters there for the next 3 months, and having just crapped his pants, the Count agreed. Thoughtfully, the general realized the preparations were complete, and now she was smiling maliciously. Taking advantage of her presence on the training grounds, she ordered all the men to be quiet, because they were questioning an order given by the feudal lord, and as soldiers, they could not disobey it. Some still tried to talk back, but the general ordered them to shut their mouths immediately. She thought that these brats were discriminating against monsters once again, so petulantly that they'd gained the courage to question her. However, there might be a chance for change. She needed to give it space to happen, and she was grateful for the Lord's order that allowed all of this. But she hoped this experience might change those young soldiers. It would be very fun to return there in the future. Now the general walked away, smiling maliciously, knowing the soldiers would get what they deserved. Finally, night fell. A man was leaving the castle carrying a bag of gold coins. It was that jerk of a mercenary. Thanks to the amount he received, he was getting closer to retirement. Knowing his beloved liked flowers, he thought about starting a business for her, but these thoughts made him quite embarrassed. He also looked at a picture of his daughter, believing he would soon return to her. That same portrait was on fire somewhere else. His town had been completely attacked and was engulfed in flames. A great wave of zombies was advancing through the destruction. Atop a hill, a mysterious figure watched intently what was happening. The knockoff Joker seemed to be enjoying this. Looking back, he noticed someone else's presence. Someone named Elisa, and said it had been a long time. That's a troop of weirdos, and they really enjoyed the reception they got in her hometown. Extending a hand to Elisa, the Joker asked if they should dance, but the girl completely ignored him until she decided to extend her hand to him. And so, the two began to dance atop that hill as the city burned to the ground. The next day, the soldiers were saying goodbye to the general. She wanted to know what China was doing there too, carrying so much luggage. He said there was no training that day, and he'd heard they were meeting somewhere. So he asked if he could accompany the general for a while, receiving permission from the protagonist to do so. Now they were going to visit that place. China was worried because if the feudal lord found out, they'd be in trouble. But she said it was fine, as she was allowed to do it. These words greatly encouraged China, who promised to take her to that place. She also noticed that China's voice had gotten stronger, which was good, but it must be a result of the training. And full of mischievous intent, she promised she would let China marry her if he became a little braver. However, China was a man in his 20s, and he imagined the general was over 60. That wasn't very appealing to him. A deadly hatred bloomed in the woman's heart. Her disciples had to hold her back, furious over the comment made about the property. Deep in the heart of the forest, a zombie is hunting. Its prey is a slime. He manages to get behind the creature, finally activating his muscle fibers to deliver a mortal blow. The zombie has caught its victim and is now applying intense isometric force, but it seems he's just doing an exercise. His companion asked if he hadn't hurt his arm recently, warning that this kind of strain could be dangerous. Nothing bad happened. Now they need to return to the protagonist, who promised to teach them a new exercise. The one who found the zombies in the forest was the general. She asked why they were carrying those slimes, but the creatures were surprised to see the humans. They knew China would be returning to the training camp after escorting that woman. China told them it was finally happening, and the general was left bewildered, as her question still hadn't been answered. The zombie explained they needed slimes. It was a request from Hansel, which is why they went to capture the creatures. This piqued the general's curiosity. She knows these monsters can't even be used as ingredients. They're completely useless. So, the zombie asked her to come with them, saying it would be better to witness it with her own eyes. This made the general ask if Hansel hadn't told them anything, but the zombie said that wasn't the case. China interrupted the general to say that those creatures aren't very good at explaining things. Looking at the two friendly little creatures, she decided to go with them. After following the path, they finally met up with Hansel. Our boy wasn't expecting China to be there, let alone the general. The woman said she stopped by to say goodbye before starting her journey, and was also curious about what they were doing. Pointing to the pile of slimes, she asked what they planned to do with them. Hansel had observed the students at the training camp, noticing that bodybuilding and weightlifting weren't efficient for them. In this situation, something more athletic could be more beneficial, but they don't have much equipment. That's why he's going to make some himself. The general said that making equipment out of slimes could be tricky, and imagined Hansel would make a dummy that needed to be cut quickly. Our boy said it had nothing to do with swords and asked them to hand him a slime. The first step is to get the creature. Then you do this. Our protagonist pierced the slime with one hand, managing to remove its core. After removing it, the core will fully regenerate in a few days. So they let it rest for that to happen properly. Now, he's going to make a hole in the creature, which is without its core. Slimes have great elasticity and contraction ability. This way, he can use the monster's body as if it were a rubber band, transforming what was once a slime into a training band. The general may not know it, but it's possible to do various exercises using that simple piece of equipment. The contraction depends on the slime's color. While our boy was explaining, the general apologized. Hansel found that too sudden and didn't understand why she had said it. She then explained that the protagonist might not be aware of it, but she'd had her suspicions. She thought he was acting obsessed with training just to get closer to the humans, but the truth was, he was being completely honest with everyone. She failed as an educator and couldn't change the discriminatory nature of that nation. That's why she has tolerated the feudal lord's lack of common sense until now. However, she recognized that Hansel is different from her. He will surely be able to bring change to this nation. Our boy seemed to grasp the scale of the challenge. Violently contracting his muscles, he said that changes were his specialty, but the general said she wasn't talking about that kind of change. So our boy called his zombies to show off their muscles too, since he can make a group change. But the general said that actually, she was talking about that kind of change. Then she threw her cape into the air, revealing she was accompanied by several students. They don't seem to be jerks, and they are interested in the knowledge the protagonist possesses. Although they're eager, some don't want to do weird things, like lying on the ground for no reason. The general wants to know if she could leave her kids in Hansel's care. Our protagonist was very surprised to see so many people, but he began to clench his fist, full of determination, stating that she could always count on him when needed. Meanwhile, somewhere else, horses are riding through the forest. The feudal lord is leading his men, and they have stopped marching. They had already reached the destroyed city and are investigating what happened. The enemies are zombies, and the worst part is that if you get bitten, you turn into a zombie too. The feudal lord told his men to be very cautious. Then he took his sword in hand, summoning his men and telling them they must advance into battle. As they approach the city, danger also draws nearer to them all, unaware they are being watched by that troop of weirdos. The Joker asked one of his companions to wait. If they get involved in the battle now, the general might show up too, but the dog keeps barking excitedly. Annoyed, the Joker punished the creature, telling it they wouldn't join the battle right now. Even after being punished, the dog remains loyal. The Joker told him to wait a little longer, that they would soon join in too. These zombies are just the beginning of it all. Meanwhile, at the training camp, humans and zombies are together. The protagonist explained that there's a limit to the resistance that can be used in a single day, which is why they train the necessary muscles. The instructor asked if everyone heard those orders, as it was time to use the equipment made by the protagonist to prepare for the bench press. However, our protagonist said they wouldn't be doing weightlifting that day. Our boy was thinking of doing CrossFit, but the instructor has no idea what that could be. It's a highly functional training method that combines various high-intensity exercises. This way, they can train different parts of the body, keeping all skills balanced. If they form groups, they can work as a team, which sparks competitiveness. There's no better training than this for everyone to start bonding. Our boy had already made a list of all the groups, and it was time for them to get ready. All the students seem very motivated and eager for it. While the Lord's soldiers continue to fight against those creatures, everyone at the training camp is exercising hard. Unlike the soldiers who are cutting off heads, those who stayed behind to train are lifting weights. At the same time the soldiers are piercing zombies with their swords, our protagonist is teaching other exercises to his students. Then he noticed something interesting. He had heard that siren at the training camp several times, so he asked the instructor what it meant. He said the feudal lord is attacking the zombies that have appeared in these lands, as they have been attacking frequently. That's the signal for help. They must need more troops, a sign that the enemy is stronger than expected. Our protagonist noticed that the members of the fourth group were failing. To continue performing the exercises well, they needed to reduce the load. Since he was interrupted, the instructor thinks the protagonist doesn't care about the battle. Back on the field, the feudal lord is congratulating his soldiers. According to the scouts' investigation, they discovered that the enemy's base is at the end of that path. Now they will eradicate them all to bring peace to this country once more. The soldiers shout in one voice, excited by their recent victory and the direction of the battle. Then the feudal lord called them all once more. The time had come to advance against the enemy. The soldiers charged toward the zombies, ready to bring much destruction. Once again, a fierce battle began. The feudal lord's advisor is worried. This time, they have advanced too deep into the forest and it could be dangerous. But the feudal lord believes the zombies aren't intelligent and have no combat tactics. All they need is enough manpower to keep pressing forward. Believing his strategy is working, he pointed to the front line, which continues to advance. The feudal lord motivates his men once more, telling them not to stop attacking. They must keep pushing through the forest until not a single enemy is left. The Joker is watching everything, and he finds it all very interesting. Deep in the forest, he found himself surrounded by soldiers, but as soon as he snapped his fingers, his companions appeared to help him in this battle. The person responsible for orchestrating the whole situation had finally appeared. After observing the army, the Joker said the soldiers had overlooked something very important during the battle. They should be using spears in this fight. Swords only serve to show off their techniques. After making this comment, he ordered his companions to attack as well. The soldiers are being completely annihilated. They're unable to stop the enemy's advance. The feudal lord decided to attack with his sword, ready to end it all. Recognizing the old man, the Joker said it had been a long time since they last met. Moving quickly, the Joker managed to block the feudal lord's attack, and sensing his strength wavering, he also commented that the lord had gotten very old. Surprised by his enemy's appearance, the feudal lord asked how he hadn't aged. He also said the Joker can't use energy freely, like his general can. And it was true. The Joker hadn't trained his energy to be used that way, but he had done some research, showing syringes filled with a mysterious substance to the feudal lord. He immediately injected the contents into his own body, causing a hideous reaction to begin. His entire body began to grow absurdly large, his muscles becoming incredible. The feudal lord realized that man had practically become one with the serum. He isn't stopping. He's already as tall as a building. Very concerned by this scene, the feudal lord realized the Joker had experimented on humans, and from the look on his face, the Joker wasn't the type to care much about it. Getting no response, the feudal lord believes the Joker's mind is on another plane. He needs to think of a strategy quickly, before he's distracted by the other enemies. The feudal lord must end the Joker's life immediately, so he began to use his combat skills. Gathering all his energy, he launched a fierce attack, determined to end the fight. But as he approached his enemy, he was caught off guard by a hand nearly 6 feet wide. The Joker managed to hit the feudal lord with great force, crushing the old man in the process. Fallen and wounded, the feudal lord is trying to figure out how the Joker's strength increased so much. But he might not have time to think about it, as the Joker moves in to strike again. The old man barely managed to dodge the blow. However, he realized that if he had been hit, he would no longer be alive. In just a few seconds, the Joker closed in on him again. The old man needs to defend himself with his sword. If he could predict the attack pattern, he might have a chance. So he decided to use his combat skill once more, but it wasn't to attack. He had to do it to defend himself. The feudal lord's sword is trembling violently. His enemy is far more powerful than he is, and due to the force of the blow, the feudal lord was thrown far away, bouncing between the trees like a ping-pong ball. Even after all those hits, the old man is still alive. Trying to lift his sword again, he realized he no longer had the strength, letting the sword fall back to the ground. It was then that the old man realized the situation was even worse than he thought. He might not be able to fight, but what he truly can't understand is how the Joker obtained such monstrous power. Approaching the old man, the Joker is sure he must be full of questions. He tells him it's called the development of civilization, and is surprised the old man believed he lost his mind during the transformation. The old man's defeat happened because he ignores everything but swordsmanship, which made him weak. After all these years, he hasn't progressed at all. The old man says the Joker knows the general's strength, yet he dares to speak such nonsense. With a smile, the Joker said he knows that woman very well, but he's overlooking something very important. Just look at the current situation, the Joker said, pointing behind him. The feudal lord immediately turned to see what had happened. His eyes witnessed something cruel. One of the Joker's subordinates is annihilating the feudal lord's army. Those men are being torn apart as if they were cheaply made toys. The Joker said it's practically a massacre, as the humans never stood a chance. They are being caught in large whirlpools caused by the dog. The Joker said there's always someone better at something, but that shouldn't be used as a benchmark. The battle is so cruel that the soldiers are being turned into zombies. The feudal lord can't believe his army is being defeated. This surprised the Joker, as the old man refuses to believe his own reality. His patience for dialogue having run out, he prepared to end the old man's life. But something happened in the darkness of the night. A secret sword technique. It struck one of the Joker's hands with precision. It's the feudal lord's advisor who has decided to appear. He told the old man to run, that he would handle the situation to buy some time. But the advisor was soon surprised by something. The feudal lord had already started to flee. He didn't even wait to hear the advisor's words. Not even the Joker expected the feudal lord to be such a coward. That was the last straw for him. It's getting hard to contain the feeling growing in his chest, until finally laughter starts to erupt from his mouth. In the end, the old man had never changed. He only cares about his own survival, and no one else's. Knowing the situation was desperate, the advisor gave an order to all the soldiers. They needed to retreat now. This is a lost battle, and they need to run as if their lives depend on it. They should follow the feudal lord to have a chance at a future. While he was still speaking, the advisor realized he was about to be attacked. One of the Joker's hands crushed him completely, leaving the poor man's sword in pieces. The army survivors are fleeing. The low-intellect zombie asked the Joker if he should pursue them. Returning to his original form, the Joker said that wasn't necessary, because they already know where the enemies are retreating to. Trusting in the old man's foolishness, he will surely gather all his people to attack again, without realizing that this strategy is actually extremely beneficial for the Joker. Mounted on his horse, the feudal lord flees in defeat, unable to believe what happened. He doesn't know what must be done to defeat those monsters. This is truly hell. Back at the training grounds, our protagonist is doing countless reps. He's simply absurd. The man knows no fatigue. The feudal lord's army continues to flee at full speed. The old man asked if there was anyone there who could report this absurd situation. A blonde-haired girl said she could do it for him. Her name is Rumi. In total, they lost 347 out of 400 soldiers. 27 are injured, and only 26 are fit to continue fighting. The old man knows he still has 100 soldiers in his castle, and the rest are just cadets in training. He doesn't know how he can win a battle against those enemies with so few troops. The girl suggested they call the general back, but the old man knows time is short. She probably won't arrive in time to save them all. Faced with the problem, the girl suggested asking the monsters in the castle for help, because as far as she knows, Hansel fought the general on equal footing, a sign that he is just as powerful. Since they are feeding the monsters and allowing them to sleep on their lands, the least they could do is grant this request. The old man is considering the idea of fighting monsters with monsters, and he seems to like it a lot, saying he will put this plan into action. After a 3-day journey, he finally reached his castle. The first place he goes is the training center. He told everyone to stop their exercises and gather before him. Our protagonist was caught by surprise by this summons. The woman accompanying the old man asked if those men were fools, telling them to do as they were ordered. Our protagonist and his zombies are approaching the old man. Interested in the protagonist, the feudal lord asked if his name was Hansel. Our boy confirms and asks if the feudal lord came to start his training too, but the old man said he was there to give an order to those monsters. It's time for these inferior beings to pay their debts for eating and sleeping on this land. From now on, they are tasked with defeating the enemies. the zombies approaching the castle. The protagonist's people were a little apprehensive about this. The big guy is just as worried. After saying that, the feudal lord asks if he was understood, since the expression on the zombies' faces is quite foolish. He also said he's giving these inferior creatures a chance to die with some dignity and honor. He even said he would grant our protagonist citizenship if he did it. It's time to show the effectiveness of the exercises they've been practicing in this place. Our protagonist immediately gave his people an order, and it's called double biceps. The zombies begin to inhale deeply, gathering all the air they can, showing the feudal lord the quality of their well-built bodies. But watching up close, the old man has no idea what the monsters are doing. The protagonist said they built their bodies through physical exercise, and this is how they show off what they've built after working out. Quite annoyed, the old man said it was no time for jokes and told them to follow his orders. But the protagonist became furious, stating that if they got hurt or if they lost their lives, they would no longer be able to continue their training. And he wants to know if the old man will take responsibility for the catabolism that might occur. The old man didn't understand those words, but observing the protagonist's dark energy, he understood he needed to apologize. He felt like throwing up from the fear that washed over him. He then made a formal apology for his words and asked those accompanying him to leave as well. Hansel turned his attention back to the cadets. Now that they were rested, it was time to get back to their exercise routine. The old man's assistant said he should try one more time, but the feudal lord has already given up on the idea. He doesn't think the monsters will cooperate. It's time to call General Boy. The girl was surprised by this suggestion. The old man knows General Boy's personality isn't very good, but he's as strong as the female general. It's time to gather all the soldiers in front of the castle gate. They are going to show those dangerous zombies the full potential of humanity. Properly positioned on the wall, they are waiting for the enemy's attack. An old man with a mohawk is among the soldiers. He must be General Boy. The old man is also there on the wall, quite fearful. A large horde of enemies has approached them. Boy asks his men to wait a little longer. He heard the enemies are being led by someone intelligent. Given the circumstances, he'd like to know if anyone is willing to talk before the battle. From among all those zombies, Karinga began to approach the wall. He does so accompanied by his allies and that strange woman. The old man immediately recognized her. That woman's name is Elisa. Karinga said it's not good to approach like this, and he wants to know what the humans want to talk about. Boy knows the enemy has the larger army, but inside is a trained army. Breaking through those walls won't be an easy task. So he suggested that a representative from each army should fight, and through a duel, they would decide the winner. Karinga really liked this proposal and decided to accept it immediately. Brimming with confidence, Boy loved hearing those words because he enjoys violence. Leaping off the wall, Boy believes he will bring terror to his enemy. He is eager to see which brave soul will face him. That mentally challenged zombie seems to have been chosen for the task. He advances towards Boy, trying to say something, but he chose to scream instead, as it's much easier than forming a complete sentence. With his sword in hand, Boy said his enemy has a formidable size. It's time to find out if he's also skilled in combat. Boy is the first to advance, ready to cut into his enemy's flesh, but the zombie with mental limitations is very strong. He managed to block the general's blow using only his strength. Boy realized that this enemy is quite tough, but that's not enough. Taking advantage of their proximity, he began to strike the zombie with all his might. The creature continues to protect itself, taking no damage. Then, it spat something at the general. Boy managed to dodge the disgusting thing. He realized it was acid and was glad to have dodged it before being hit. Knowing his enemy is very resilient, he asked how his body was made, as it's not common for the undead to be so strong. But the mentally challenged zombie is unable to give a coherent answer, so he started moving very fast. Boy thought his enemy was fleeing as he started to create distance. But the general won't allow that to happen. This duel will only end when one of them is no longer alive. Now, Boy is about to get his hands on the enemy who had fled. But all of this is following the plan of the intellectually limited zombie. Boy began to find the way things were happening strange. The old man told the general to be cautious. Someone had thrown a piece of bone in his direction. Fortunately, the general managed to use his sword to block the attack. And now he wants to know who dares to disturb such a sacred duel. The one responsible is a dog, which now starts barking to distract the general. Unexpectedly, Boy was hit in the back by a blow from Karinga. After using his steroids, he mocked the not-so-sacred duel. There is only one reason he accepted the duel proposed by the general. Because Boy is the only problematic variable left inside that castle. He chased the simple-minded zombie, not realizing he was being lured into a trap, and now he's on the ground. getting beaten badly. Karinga said this general has the brain of a bull, just as his name suggests. The feudal lord watches the brutal beating. The big bear is also on the wall, watching in complete disbelief. Defeated, the general apologized and asked to be spared. While he continues to be beaten, Karinga said they will spare him. After giving a signal to the simple-minded zombie, the creature brought the general's body to him, tossing the man's body high into the air. Boy has no idea what is happening. But as he began to fall, he understood the end that awaited him. He was thrown to the hungry zombies. A short time later, he had joined that army of the undead. The feudal lord realized the situation had become very bad, as he had just lost an excellent fighter. From outside, Karinga told him to accept defeat and hand over the castle. That way he might be spared. But the old man doesn't want to do that. He would never hand over that region to someone who has abandoned their own humanity. Karinga said they no longer have a deal. The man's life will not be spared in any way. Then he started pointing at the wall, ordering his army of the undead to advance as well. All the zombies are heading straight for the gate. Desperate, the feudal lord told the archers to start shooting. But among those men, many are unprepared. They don't know how to use a bow. This made the old man even more worried, and the girl accompanying him wants to know what they should do now. After thinking deeply about the problem, he said he has no idea, a revelation so sincere that it surprised the girl. Soon after, the old man was overcome with fear and began to flee from the walls. He is going deeper and deeper into the castle, knowing he's known for being a coward. All he has done in his life so far is run away. Even the female general knows of the feudal lord's reputation for backing down easily. A scholar said this could be a positive trait, as he prioritizes survival at all costs. In the middle of the flashback, he remembered when an important woman in his life was taken prisoner. In all these situations, he just kept running, realizing that bearing the burden of responsibility is very difficult. However, this escape was planned. He is heading straight for the training grounds. After passing through the gates, the old man begged to be saved. He apologized for looking down on those monsters and for being an ass. Even if he were to be killed, he is begging for the lives of the innocent people to be saved. And now he's begging for the protagonist and his people to do something. After hearing that plea, Hansel asked if the old man wishes to exercise. Standing up, the old man became even more confused. While stretching his own arms, Hansel said he doesn't need his life. But the personal training fee he's going to charge this man just went way up. The instructor, along with the humans, said he wants to join this battle too. But our boy told the rookies to stay put. The zombies added that anyone who can't lift a total of 400 kilos on the big 3 lifts should stay out of this. That's what they said. And now they're giving the rookies an intimidating stare. After hearing that, the old man is sure these monsters are a bunch of idiots. Still, there's something very different about them. They all seem extremely nice. Accompanied by his army, the protagonist is heading to the main gate. To get there, they need to take a straight path. Since this is an emergency, they're going to do it with interval training. After a slow walk, they break into a full sprint, and they'll keep this fast pace for 1.5 minutes. The only one who can't keep up is Fatty. He's already gasping for air, practically having a heart attack. He's amazed by the speed of all his companions. In the heart of the city, zombies are about to end the lives of innocents. But our protagonist's army prevented anything worse from happening. The child in its mother's arms was surprised and told her that they had been saved. After that, our protagonist continued advancing towards the castle gate. Her son is deeply impressed, wondering if he could get that strong by training with a sword. But his mother told him that wasn't done with swords. However, they'll ask those people what technique they use after this war is over. The gate has been breached and the battle is getting fiercer. Our protagonist used his Hawkeye. Observing the zombies' appearance, he thought they looked like they needed to hydrate. Fatty finally managed to join them after doing his best to cover the distance without dying. He said they're zombies too, but since he couldn't finish his sentence, our boy told him not to slouch like that because it's terrible for his posture. Fatty explained that this type of zombie is driven only by hunger. They have no intelligence. They are just moving bodies. As he destroys his enemies, our protagonist realized he won't mourn for any of them. Now Fatty wants to know what Hansel will do in a situation like this. Our boy saw that the enemies were pouring through the gate, so he thought about pushing them back outside using only the strength of his pecs. Fatty was surprised by this strategy, looking a bit skeptical. Our protagonist noticed the doubt in his eyes, and Fatty quickly said the plan was excellent. This made the protagonist a little happier, and Fatty asked to lead the battle. Hansel immediately granted his request. Now that he's in command, Fatty started to think maliciously, as he is also a creature of darkness. He told groups 1 and 2 to spread out around the village and protect the residents. Groups 3 and 4 were tasked with climbing the castle walls to help the human soldiers in the fight. Meanwhile, Group 5 would be in charge of helping the protagonist with his task. But Fatty soon realized that Hansel wouldn't need any help at all, and as foolish as his plan seemed, it appeared to be working. While Fatty was thinking about this, someone said the gate must be blocked now. It was the feudal lord who had given the order. Even though the protagonist managed to push the creatures back, the entrance still posed a danger. That's why they must close it immediately. But his assistant said the gate was destroyed. There's nothing they can use to block the entrance. The situation is getting dire. However, China already knew something like this would happen. With the help of other zombies, he managed to carry a huge iron dumbbell to the battlefield. The old man immediately recognized China. He knew him as the general's incompetent student. Seeing the size of that weight, the feudal lord's assistant wondered how they managed such a feat, and our protagonist was surprised. His subordinates continued to carry it. China is helping them all in this effort. But since the weight is so massive, the zombies are starting to get tired. It's too much for them. China tried to motivate his companions, saying it wasn't time to give up yet. The zombie knows his human companion is very optimistic and cares about them. But if they push themselves too hard to carry that weight, they could end up injured. And if that happened, they wouldn't be able to continue training. With no strength left to continue, the zombie simply gave up halfway. This left China quite emotional. Furthermore, the extra weight China now had to carry was proving to be intense. His strength was also draining, and his vision began to fade, until finally, everything came back into focus. He couldn't believe he was able to carry this weight, but someone else decided to help him. Using his ability, Fatty reduced the total weight of the dumbbell, and he told Group 5 to help China carry that weight to the gate, because it was time for them to block access to the city once again. China is making every possible effort to contribute to this task. Assisted by his fellow zombies, they are close to finally reaching the protagonist. Straining with all their might, they are getting closer. All this while, the protagonist waits patiently, but it seems that wait is too much for all of them. When they are almost at their limit, the long walk finally comes to an end. They manage to block the castle entrance using that huge weight. After exerting themselves like that, everyone is drenched in sweat. The zombie became so much of a Chad that the illustrator even gave him a nose. Our protagonist noticed that his allies had carried the weight very carefully, mindful of their joints. So he praised everyone's work, and now they are celebrating with their sweaty bodies. Because they managed to do it, Fatty is celebrating. The first part of the strategy was complete. The group responsible for carrying the heavy weight can now rest for a bit, and everyone except for groups 1 and 2 must push back the zombies that are trying to advance. The protagonist's allies are now climbing the stairs. They are taking their positions along the wall, ready to support the protagonist during this battle. Using the strength of their muscles, they began to push back their enemies. One of the zombies is wondering if they are doing it the right way. Hansel said they should focus more on their pectoral muscles. Following his advice, they began to perform absurd contractions. But those enemies are fierce and seem to be starving. Due to the close contact, our protagonist's allies are exposed to danger. The feudal lord's assistant said they must not get bitten under any circumstances. Otherwise, they'll end up getting infected by these other zombies. And one of our protagonist's zombies has just been bitten. The infection is spreading through its body. Its mouth snapped shut violently, and it's salivating in agony. Then it started screaming in the middle of the battlefield. He was quickly reprimanded by one of his friends. He shouldn't pretend to be infected since they are already the living dead. The feudal lord's assistant did not expect something like this. She really can't understand what these creatures are doing. But our protagonist allies said it was a lot of fun. Jokes aside, they still have a battle to win. The monsters are advancing again, and they decided to aim for our protagonist's muscles. One of the cursed creatures tried to bite him, but all it managed to do was break its teeth in the process. Our protagonist didn't appreciate the close contact. He destroyed his enemy with a single blow because it had stained his muscles. Watching the battle, Joker started to get nervous. He doesn't know who these new enemies are. It seems a boy accompanied by monsters is winning the battle, but they can't understand why the monsters are helping the humans. This is truly an unexpected outcome. But Joker continues to analyze everything coldly, and he ordered one of his allies to bite our protagonist. They advance rapidly towards our boy, ready to execute their leader's plan. The bottoms in the battle are also very engaged. They want to avenge those who have fallen in battle. The Twink and the Big Bear managed to block the charge of the approaching enemies. High up in the tower, the feudal lord reappeared and asked his assistant to clear a path. Once at the window, he spoke directly to our protagonist. Pointing in Joker's direction, he said that he is the one responsible for all of this. But Hansel is too busy with the zombies. He can't see through the swarm of enemies. The feudal lord told him to just walk in a straight line, and he would eventually find an enemy with blue hair. Our protagonist recorded these words. Before leaving, he asked if his allies could keep holding back the creatures, and one of the zombies said yes. Now our boy's path is clear. Leading with his chest, he plows a path through those cursed creatures. Watching from above, The feudal lord was even more impressed. He was witnessing a miracle. The battlefield had been completely cleared by the protagonist. It was unbelievable. Growing more furious, Coringa realized the zombies were completely useless, and he wants to know if the other guy agrees. But so far, this character has refused to say a single word. Coringa didn't want to join the battle, but the protagonist's presence was an unexpected variable. So he started walking toward our boy, who, by now, seems to have found the blue-haired enemy. The two are staring each other down, ready for battle. Hansel noticed his enemy's body starting to grow much larger, and he's coming right at him to attack. But our protagonist isn't afraid of muscles built on juice. As soon as they met, they began to exchange powerful blows. Hansel and Coringa are both determined to end this fight. The force they're both exerting is immense, but given his size, our protagonist has the advantage. Impressed by this, Coringa asked why that monster was interfering with the humans. Our boy said he will protect his new bodybuilding disciples. Now he's applying even more force, putting more pressure on his enemy, who, for the first time in his life, felt overpowered. Slamming his enemy to the ground, Hansel declared he would protect his people no matter what. Coringa grew more and more frightened, as his own strength was not enough to resist. After being thrown to the ground, his neck was grabbed by our protagonist, and he could feel the truly impressive power in that grip. Trying to break free, Coringa started hitting our protagonist with a flurry of blows. But after that desperate attempt, our protagonist wants to know if that's all he's got, because now it's his turn to show what real strength is. Our protagonist is using the full power of his muscle contractions, and while holding Coringa's body down, he started dragging him across the ground, leaving a huge trail of destruction in his wake. Coringa's allies realized the situation had changed. Meanwhile, the less intelligent zombies were having a hard time defeating the human soldiers. Elisa tries to tell her ally that the situation has gotten very complicated. The time has come for her to eliminate the risk factors. Changing her body's appearance, she revealed she was carrying several blades. She is likely dangerous. Accompanied by the dog, she approaches Coringa to help him in the fight, but she didn't expect something to happen in the middle of the forest. Before she could get close to our protagonist, a warrior carrying a sword appeared. Elisa has no idea who this woman is. This new character is the general's aunt, and her name is Chuva. Now, these two women are locked in a fierce battle. Knowing she would be busy, Elisa told the dog to keep looking for Coringa. The obedient creature goes after the one who treats it so poorly. After exchanging a few blows, Chuva asked Elisa if she really thought she could get past her with that level of skill. Consumed by hatred, Elisa believes it's more than enough. Finally, she found an opening in the fight, and back at the castle, Gordo is using his skills again, telling everyone to keep pulling. With the help of the zombies, they are preparing a giant slingshot. The time has finally come to launch the boulder, its weight reduced thanks to Gordon's ability. But midway, things are about to change. The huge boulder is flying through the sky like a meteor, and now its weight has been increased tenfold. It's heading straight for the battlefield. It exploded in midair, its debris raining down on everything below. After that effective attack, Gordon told the zombies to keep gathering more rocks. He also told Team 1 to keep searching for any remaining zombies inside the village. Group 2 must continue to protect the gate and prepare to repair it. As for Teams 3 and 4, they must continue to repel the zombies trying to approach. The feudal lord observes all this. He knows the protagonist is powerful, but that Gordon leading everyone is exceptional, proving to be a great strategist. It's as if he's watching everything from a higher vantage point. The old man heard a lost legend from his grandfather about a monstrous creature that allied itself with humans. That was the hero of the Fourth Great War, the dragon strategist. And that name came to the feudal lord's mind after watching what Gordo has been doing in the battle. Back to our protagonist, he continues to pummel Coringa. The villain tries to use his techniques again to increase his body's size. He manages to transform one of his arms into a spiked club. He decided to aim for the space between our protagonist's ribs. A huge impact followed. However, Hansel wasn't impressed. All he had to do was flex his own muscles, while holding Coringa with one hand. It was then that the villain realized he couldn't pull his arm out of the protagonist's muscles. Finally, barks were heard from the forest. After finding the protagonist, the dog decided to attack him with bones. This technique is a mix of wind and necromancy, a very refined skill. The force of those bones is comparable to steel and can crush an unprotected head thanks to the power of the wind. Several of these attacks were sent directly at the protagonist, and even after being hit, he wasn't affected. In fact, to Hansel, it felt like an acupuncture session. After its attempted attack, the dog became very quiet, until Coringa gave it an order. Because he's suffering in this battle, he needs to resort to everything he has. After injecting a large amount of juice, Coringa lamented having to do something like this, saying that everything about to happen was the protagonist's fault. But our boy knows that no matter how strong that guy gets, he won't be able to break free from his grasp. To Hansel's surprise, something unexpected happened. Coringa managed to grab our boy by the neck. At the same time, he completely lost his own grip, as the creature's neck had become too wide. Even though the neck got wider, our protagonist tries to grab his enemy but can't get a hold. Not to mention the fact that Coringa is now trying to strike him, landing a punch right in our protagonist's gut. The force of the impact sent him flying. Even while in the air, Hansel doesn't seem to have taken any damage. Coringa is now chasing after him. Moving very quickly, he believes he has the advantage over our protagonist, believing he can't be seen by normal human eyes. But our boy is using his full muscular potential, controlling all his contractions. Our protagonist understands how muscle fibers work, and at that moment, Coringa said he wanted to save this revelation for a special occasion. Since Hansel interfered where he shouldn't have, he'll pay with his life. But our boy is using the full potential of his red muscle fibers, striking an ab pose. While he strikes poses to show off his muscles, he manages to block all of Coringa's attacks. There is still the hidden potential of the white muscle fibers. They don't have as much myoglobin for explosive power, but they have the advantage of not tiring quickly. Coringa realized he wasn't managing to damage his enemy, so he decided to change his attack strategy. Using even greater force, he strikes our protagonist in the back. The protagonist's strategy to win this battle is to be more resilient than his enemy, to wear him out. That's why he keeps flexing his muscles, waiting for Coringa to run out of strength. This battle has now become a duel of endurance. The one with better conditioning will be the victor. But our protagonist was unaware of something fundamental. Coringa's body was not built naturally. He achieved that strength and muscle mass through the use of juice. About to receive another blow, our protagonist assumed the insane chest pose, while Coringa is prepared to hit him with a devastating blow. The two enemies clash once more, continuing this battle of strength and endurance. Our protagonist now has to get more and more serious during this fight, and the same can be said for Coringa, who had to use the full potential of the juice just to make the protagonist start to sweat. Now that their combat had gone this far, Joker was trying to understand the reason behind that strength. He ended up dodging the protagonist's arms, deciding it would be better not to waste his strength against that enemy. Hansel noticed something about his foe. Even if he could control his muscles, controlling the nervous system is difficult. After all, not even our protagonist is used to this task, as his body is changing very rapidly. Now he just needs to wait for Joker to tire out for good. Back in the battle with the humans, the zombie with a very modest IQ was being pressured by their passive abilities. He decided to spin around his own body like a top with his arms outstretched. This way, he managed to gain some space from his enemies. Growing more furious, the intellectually challenged zombie said those enemies were weak. The twink knows he isn't stronger than him, but there's something the zombie doesn't have in this battle, the power of friendship, which is much more powerful than him. But as soon as he used his combat technique, the twink was crushed by the devastating fist of the mentally challenged zombie. He managed to hurl his enemy far away with that single blow. Big Bear didn't like what happened, and decided to go on the attack with his dull sword, which cuts enemies through sheer violence. He's ready to strike the zombie who can't count, but that blow was too slow. Despite being huge, he managed to disappear from where he stood, leaving only the twink's body behind. Big Bear's strike is already in motion. He won't be able to stop that sword, but by some miracle, he managed to prevent his friend from being annihilated in that way. Greatly relieved by what happened, he didn't notice that the zombie with non-existent intelligence was already behind him, ready to attack once more. Before he could look back to behold the great danger, something happened. Big Bear realized his enemy had vanished. Something had hit him at the last second. Our protagonist was the one who accidentally struck that creature. Ignoring what had happened, he returned to his own fight, leaving Big Bear completely speechless. Because not only had he been saved, but he had also just realized something even more interesting. His enemy was defeated with a single blow. Maybe he should join our protagonist's workout team. On the borders of that land, there is a very peaceful city by the sea. The messenger went there to contact the female general, and he is desperate to find her. She wants to know what's so urgent that it made the messenger enter her house uninvited. Since she was already very drunk and had been harboring lewd feelings for a long time, she suggested they do something very enjoyable. The messenger said it's no time for jokes. The situation is dire. The general said she needed to catch her breath first, and the messenger informed her that the castle was under attack by a group of zombies, and they need her strength immediately. Ignoring the urgency of the warning, the general said the army is capable of handling something like that. However, the messenger said that the person behind the attack is Joker. This left the general quite thoughtful, as she knows who this person is. Remembering him, the general started to smile, until she began to do so uncontrollably, making the messenger uncomfortable. Once again, he said the matter was urgent, and it was no time for jokes. But the general said the occasion was perfect, as she was lamenting what would happen to Joker. She also told the messenger that there are two shields in the castle. The first is a reliable ally named Hansel, and there is also the adorable niece. Folks, I have to make a correction now. This girl is the general's niece, not her aunt. And according to her, She will soon be #1 in this entire continent. Rain is completely focused on the battle, using her secret techniques to achieve victory against Elisa. That continent had already gone through a great war, and it seemed to have no end. In ancient times, exercises were condemned, and the elves ended up being persecuted, until a human doctor began to spread information about elven meditation and Ikos exercises. Thanks to this pattern of movement went beyond exercise, and is now being used as a battle technique by the elves. Rain grew up in the forest of this people, learning many things. She ended up completely mastering the elves' exercise routine, possessing great agility, even managing to stand on her enemy's blade. She achieved all this progress after 7 years of arduous training, to the point of developing her own techniques. Seeing that she's in the air, Elisa said she won't be able to dodge the blows just because of the distance. Approaching Rain, Elisa is ready to end the fight. However, Rain seems to be waiting for her approach. The two once again clash with their blades in midair. Elisa keeps pressing, using her body's momentum to push her enemy, but Rain's secret techniques are very efficient. Sliding across the blade, she managed to catch it with her feet. Rain said she could never be defeated by this type of enemy. After being outmaneuvered, Elisa assured her that she was not yet close to defeat. Before she could try any move, she was caught by one of Rain's techniques, who is now delivering several sword strikes towards the girl. Rain suggested that Elisa try doing the spin she had done earlier. Getting more and more irritated in this fight, Elisa said she doesn't take advice from her enemies. And using more and more of her strength, Rain said that the girl should start using common sense, noticing that her sword technique is very similar to her own aunt's. But comparing the two, Elisa's technique is just a drop of water, while the general's is a full bucket. After a few more blows, Rain realized that comparison didn't quite capture everything. Far away, the general is still drinking alcohol peacefully, thinking someone must have been talking about her because her ears are itching. Elisa is ready to attack again, using all the blades she carries on her body. This time, she wants to end this fight once and for all, sending all her completely destructive blows in Rain's direction. However, the girl used another of her skills, physical strengthening, managing to stop all the swords without much difficulty. She also noticed that her opponent's balance was being compromised. The time has come for Rain to end this fight. Using all her body's flexibility, she approaches menacingly, carrying her sword. Before the outcome of the fight was shown, we were taken back to the protagonist. After defending against the last attack, he's expecting Joker to be very exhausted. And indeed, the enemy knows that the gap between them is very large. While our boy doesn't understand why Joker doesn't get tired, the villain can't understand why he can't cause any damage. Even so, he keeps attacking, trying to understand the secret behind that body. Furious, Joker decided to ask why our protagonist hadn't fallen defeated yet. But upon hearing that, the protagonist said he should have been the one to say something like that. Joker revealed that he developed that drug to win a battle against the general. This is a power so great it can rival ancient dragons. Even hearing this, Hansel said that Joker needs to train a lot more. Blocking this last blow, Joker uses the power of the juice to make his muscles grow once more. But that wasn't intentional. It's the side effect of excessive drug use. Moving away from our protagonist, he realized he needed to use the neutralizer immediately, or he could have serious problems. Our protagonist wants to know what kind of body-altering drugs his enemy is using, because in a matter of seconds, Joker changed form completely. It looks like he's melting entirely. Feeling a sudden sickness, he started vomiting a lot, a disgusting green liquid. Our protagonist imagines it's a nutritional imbalance, but the system said he's wrong. After vomiting everything, Joker returned to his original form, a thin man, worn out by time. With his hands still trembling, Joker realized he needed another dose, but now he's overcome with dread. He doesn't know why he entered a battle against that monster. Trying to change the subject, he told our protagonist that they don't need to keep fighting. It would be a great waste of life if they continued with all that violence, because the world is very beautiful. Getting closer, Hansel admits he doesn't want to continue fighting. But Joker started all of this, and it's time for him to reap the consequences. Thanks to that great battle, many people had to stop training, and that makes our protagonist very furious. Joker apologized for his mistakes. He never imagined he could cause so much trouble, and now he is deeply terrified. All he wants is to save Elisa. Seeing his enemy hunched on the ground, Hansel began to wonder who this woman could be. The Joker assured him that he does all of this for her. Another flashback occurs. A crow is perched on top of a post. Joker said that girl is dead. She seems to have been executed by the townspeople, and the true reason for that attack is his need for revenge. Joker took the opportunity to grab another syringe containing the juice. That version of the drug is very painful, and it affects your thoughts. It must be trenbolone for sure. He had almost forgiven our boy for a second, but he managed to inject the contents of that syringe into him. Before the side effects kick in, he's going to end this fight, ending the protagonist's life violently. But as soon as his body began to change, something happened. All the confidence Joker carried had vanished, because he saw something happen in the sky, something he wasn't expecting. Elisa had been defeated in the forest, another unexpected flashback in the story. It all started 32 years ago. Some soldiers are training inside the castle. Among them is a scholarly-looking man, reading his book very calmly. This is Joker, at only 17 years old. He asked his friend why the people in that place don't have much mana. Weirdo has no idea what the answer is. This guy must be the feudal lord, but I could be wrong. Joker said that he is the next successor to that land, and should pay attention to Joker's discoveries. But the young feudal lord is very focused on his training, and he knows his friend will tell him what he discovered, whether he listens or not. Since he needed to recover from the exercises, the young feudal lord said he could listen to this theory. Joker said that mana is different from physical strength. It's a very delicate energy, and the more emotional a person is, the more smoothly the mana will flow through them. But in the country where they live, the rules are so strict that they are forced to suppress their own emotions from an early age. That's why they can't fully develop their mana, nor can they increase the size of their core. The young feudal lord said that this energy is the curse of mages, and that the physical power of their people is their greatest identity. Joker said his friend just said something a politician would say, a very offensive comment since nobody likes politicians. The young feudal lord suggested his friend abandon his studies. It was time for them to practice a bit, throwing a wooden stick in his direction. Since that sounded like a lot of fun, Joker agreed to practice. In a few seconds, they were exchanging blows. Even though he's a scholar, Joker knows how to use a wooden sword, and he manages to pressure the future feudal lord. However, the young lord is full of vigor. He manages to find an opening in the glasses wearer's attacks. After taking a few powerful hits, Joker fell to the ground, having been knocked off balance. The victory went to the young feudal lord. He now has 123 wins and 43 losses against that opponent. After they finished practicing, someone else joined them. It's their teacher, and the future general of that place, Miss Ryan. No joke, her name has already changed like 3 times in this story. Approaching them, Ryan said that Joker needed to hone his talent more, as he needed to increase his stamina. But the boy said he doesn't like fencing, but the teacher assured him that one day he would appreciate it. He just needed to get better. Just look at the young feudal lord, who clearly seems to enjoy every training session. However, he denies his own reality. That kind of training doesn't please him at all, yet he keeps doing it. Until a completely new person interrupted the conversation, telling Ryan that Joker has no talent for this. These words were very offensive, and neither of the boys liked hearing that. Because of everything that happened, Ryan forgot to introduce this maiden to her students. From that day on, she would be training with them, too. This is her special student, and her name is Elise. She appears to be a very promising warrior. Overflowing with confidence, Elisa guaranteed she wouldn't be defeated, even if those two decided to attack her at the same time. Furious, the two decided to put this to the test, as they were facing a very arrogant woman. Elisa is fully prepared to crush these people's egos. She didn't like being underestimated just for being a woman, and now she charges at them like a raging animal. The young feudal lord and Joker realized they were in trouble. This woman is a real danger. After the beating session, the young feudal lord started to smile. Joker had to admit it, that woman is very strong. The young feudal lord had to agree with those words. But thinking about this woman, he realized she is very different from the nobles of this region. He can't find the right words to describe her, but that commoner has a very special charm, for she possesses a truly impressive beauty. After they were defeated, Joker started talking more about a dream he had. He decided he is going to marry that girl. This revelation left the young feudal lord very surprised, as he had surely thought the same thing. Noticing his surprise, Joker asked if something was wrong, and the feudal lord acknowledged that dream was too big, because Elisa isn't interested in men weaker than her, and she had said so that afternoon. Joker is terrible at fencing, but the boy had renewed his confidence, promising he would try even harder from that day on to become a strong and fierce fighter. So the two friends continued to practice, and slowly the score between them began to change. Joker's effort is genuine. He managed to increase his wins to 92, and after training hard, he managed to turn the score around, becoming the absolute best. After being defeated so many times, the young feudal lord doesn't know what he did wrong, as he used to win those battles with ease. Elisa was training with them, and asked if the young feudal lord would like to train a bit more with her. But the man's confidence had been shaken, believing he had been left behind. He said he couldn't train now, as he was very busy with official matters of the region. His father is furious. He allowed the boy to train in fencing, yet he still can't beat the other youths. The young feudal lord admits that perhaps he has no talent for this kind of skill, but his father remains furious. After throwing a wine glass at the young man's face, he said he doesn't want to hear it. He has only one son, who is a complete incompetent. The current lord's name is Leonardo. With his face covered in wine, the young feudal lord apologized to his majesty. Later that same day, it started to rain heavily, and the young feudal lord decided to isolate himself for a bit. Someone started approaching him, saying that the young prince might get sick if he stayed outside. But the young feudal lord said it was fine. Elisa ended up surprising him, saying that was utter foolishness. She can't understand how someone can say they're fine while looking so sad. Since he doesn't know how to enjoy life, it was time to join Elisa on her adventures. Walking through the city, the young feudal lord became intrigued. That woman smiled all the time, and he began to wonder if she was truly happy just by being with him. Conflicting feelings arose in his heart, thinking she might be interested in him and not Joker. If that's really true, he will become the happiest man in this land. The next day, they went to the training grounds inside the castle. Rumors are spreading around the place. Joker confessed his feelings to Elisa, but he was rejected. As soon as he heard this, the young feudal lord was filled with hope, believing he now had a chance. He decided to go to Elisa to confirm his feelings, believing she felt the same way. The idealistic young man is heading towards her, his heart overflowing with hope. His desire to love is so great that he's willing to abandon his own family if necessary, because all he needs to be happy is to be by her side. But as soon as he arrived at that house, the young feudal lord encountered something different. Through the window, he ended up seeing something he didn't want to see. He immediately became very upset, feeling rejected upon seeing Elisa in the company of someone else. Hatred seized his heart when he recognized the man with her. It was the Joker.